The knight finally spotted the enemy and shouted loudly to the others, pointing his hand in the direction where he stood. He was absolutely certain it was him. Without wasting a second, he shouted again that they needed to grab him immediately before he disappeared like he had before. This was their only chance. But this knight fought truly with dignity, and each of his blows was measured down to the smallest precision, as if he had been born with a sword in his hands. Everyone who watched him was truly shocked by his skill. He fought off attacks from several sides so quickly and skillfully. It was truly terrifying. Diana Resley felt the fear of death creeping under her skin. She truly didn't want to die now. And even though this knight had spent more than 20 years on the battlefield, his movements still impressed with their liveliness and dexterity. But in truth, he was nothing more than a useless pawn to them who could be sacrificed at any moment without any regrets. However, the warrior himself seemed to feel no pity for his own life. He walked forward as if prepared to die at any moment, and all because this is precisely what he saw as the essence of chivalry: to fight to the end no matter what, even to the point of one's own death. For 5 years now they had been facing him on the battlefield again, and it had all begun to tire him and irritate him. He was already tired of this faceless confrontation. He wanted to finally see the face of the one he had fought for so long, the one he shared the field with. He gave the order to remove the knight's helmet. Only then, he thought, would he finally discover who lurked beneath that silent iron. When the soldiers carried out the order and removed the helmet, the man froze. He was shocked to the depths of his soul. He could not believe his eyes. In none of his assumptions did he expect that all this time there had been a woman standing in front of him, hiding under the armor. He was sure it was impossible. That same insane war machine that had inspired terror turned out to be a young girl. He looked at her and realized that Adele had already lost this war, and nothing could be changed. It was all over. Victory had slipped away forever. With her death, the whole battle should have ended, but now it turned out to be a girl. This turned everything upside down. And her hair was bright red too. It felt somehow sad to just up and kill her, as if I were breaking something else, not an enemy. Diana thought he was just crazy, but the man with white hair suddenly laughed lightly and almost cheerfully. He admitted that he himself did not understand how it was possible to fight with her for 5 years and remain sane after everything. He said that he was giving her a choice and asked, who would she like to be remembered as? A girl or a knight who would be remembered? He asked her if she wanted to go down in history as a woman or as a warrior, since over the years he had become attached to her and would now do as she wished. Diana didn't understand what day it was today or why he'd called it a new day. He seemed unaware of what she was talking about either, and simply asked that she explain everything calmly and carefully. The girl calmly explained that despite the fact that she now really looks like a girl in essence, she still remains a knight and does not intend to give it up. Therefore, Diana had no reason to believe that feminine appearance and knighthood could not be combined. She neither divided these concepts nor saw any contradiction in them. Kier was surprised by these words. He paused for a moment, then cautiously asked her exactly what her name was, as if he wanted to confirm it for himself. The lady replied that her name was Diana, after which she discreetly asked him what his name was in order to end this strange and slightly tense acquaintance. He pronounced his name with slight hesitation, but still confidently. His name was Kier Heyman. He came from one of the duchies and was not a common man. After this, Kier suddenly asked what her last words would be, as if everything that was happening was approaching some kind of tragic outcome, although she did not look frightened. Diana, without losing her composure, said she wanted him to kill her with one blow. She couldn't stand pain and preferred a quick, dignified death without suffering. Kier merely sighed heavily and smiled slightly, as if her request struck him as somehow familiar or even a little touching. He didn't argue. Then the girl mentally decided that if she really had another life, she would never under any circumstances pick up a sword again. After some time after this determination, she slowly opened her eyes, and the first thing she felt was silence and a feeling of warmth around her. Diana found herself in bed. It was so unexpected that she even became afraid. Was she really alive? Or was this the beginning of something new? Her mind was clouded and she could barely comprehend what was happening. Her head was spinning a little and she couldn't figure out where she was or what had happened to her. A maid entered the room. She was surprised to see the lady already awake and quickly said she'd bring water for washing. She asked her to wait a bit. The girl stood up. Why did she think of Olga? Perhaps because she hadn't seen the young servant for a long time and didn't immediately recognize her face. She realized she was in her room at the Resley estate. It had been so long ago that Diana had almost begun to forget what her own home looked like. Because of this, she thought that everything that was happening was some kind of strange and very vivid dream, but on the other hand, everything seemed too real. The maid stopped by the bed and, noticing her thoughtfulness, carefully asked if everything was all right with her and if she felt unwell. But Diana merely rolled onto her side and quietly replied that everything was fine. She asked them not to worry and dismissed the maid so she wouldn't disturb her rest. She added that she wanted to bask in this peace for a little while longer. Hearing this, the maid decided that her mistress must have fallen ill. The maid said she'd bring Electrostal to her and asked her to wait a bit. For Diana, that feeling of peace and comfort was almost forgotten. Diana enjoyed this dream. It seemed truly happy to her. Everything around her was so comfortable, especially the soft, warm bed. But at the same time, everything that was happening seemed too real to be an ordinary dream. She was no longer sure she was dreaming. She looked down at her hands and then slowly walked towards the mirror as if hoping to see something there that would explain what was happening to her. Diana Resley rose and realized it was definitely not a dream. Everything that was happening seemed eerily familiar, and at some point she realized she might have returned to the past. She was now no more than 10 years old. However, there was one odd thing that made Diana unsure whether she had truly returned to the past. The thing was the power she'd wielded before her reincarnation remained with her in this body. She felt it within her as if nothing had changed since then. And since the power remained, Diana thought that perhaps this time she would really be able to defeat him, the one whom she could not before. A maid entered the room and announced that Mistress Diana was being called by her master. There was a hint of trepidation in the girl's voice, but she didn't dare say anything unnecessary. Diana assumed they were talking about her father. Perhaps he had already returned home, and now wanted to talk to his daughter about something important as he had before. And then Diana remembered. It was at this very moment in her past life that he had told her she had turned 10. This became a turning point in her life. That's when he told her it was time to learn something, that a woman should be able to provide for herself if need arises and live with dignity. That day he asked her whether she wanted to learn the art of the sword or choose another path worthy of a noble lady of her birth. Or she, like her sister Juliana, should attend lessons in etiquette, music, and dancing as is customary among girls at court. Diana then without hesitation replied that she was ready to go to him. She wanted to meet her father to hear it again with a different heart. In the past, she chose the sword. It was then that she embarked on the path of a knight, unaware of where it would lead. And that decision determined her future, but now everything is different. Diana swore to herself that she would never again pick up a sword. Then, just like in her previous life, her father spoke almost the same words. He said she was turning 10 and that was important. He repeated that it would be a good idea to learn to wield a sword so that he could be of use to the family if need be. Diana recognized the same tone. In the old days, she had been afraid of his gaze. It seemed stern, demanding, and frightening to the point of trembling. Now everything had changed. She felt no fear at all. On the contrary, a strange, piercing feeling of sympathy for him arose in her soul. Before her stood hands that she knew had never held a sword. They seemed weak, incapable of strength or threat. His thin body didn't inspire fear either, and now Diana couldn't understand why he had previously filled her with such terror. She even thought that if she gave him a slight push, he would immediately stagger and fall. He looked too fragile, and he, as if sensing her inner confusion, shuddered. Something invisible ran through his body like goosebumps. He simply expressed the opinion that perhaps Diana should learn to wield a sword, because even if she didn't become a knight, the skill might come in handy. But Diana firmly stated that she wanted to learn the rules of etiquette and aspired to become a lady since it was difficult for her to imagine how she could be useful as a knight. She admitted that she is inferior to her half-sister Regina in everything, and that is why she wants to focus on etiquette in order to become a true noble lady. After he had heard her point of view, Diana said goodbye quietly and said that she was going to return to her quarters and get some rest. The path to becoming a knight turned out to be incredibly difficult and grueling, especially for a young girl unaccustomed to such stress. She really gave it her all during training. She didn't leave the court from morning until evening and was so tired that in the evening she could barely move her arms. All this was endless training in which there was no rest or indulgence, and with each passing day, it only became harder for Diana. If you missed even one training session the next day, it was almost impossible to catch up with the others and keep up with the pace. Now that she had decided to give up the sword, she had to concentrate and collect her thoughts because the old path was closed. From this day on, Diana is no longer a knight, but a noble lady, and she must learn to live by the new rules that befit this title. The sky quickly became covered with dark clouds, and a few minutes later, a strong, noisy downpour broke out over the earth, as if everything was mourning her choice. Diana could not understand why it rained so heavily on that particular day, as if the sky itself was expressing some kind of annoyance. Her half-sister came to see her and said that everyone was sure that Diana was ill, but at the same time she looked quite healthy, without the slightest sign of illness. She also noted that she had heard from someone that Diana had decided to sign up for etiquette classes, and now everyone was talking about it. Regina, her half-sister, discontentedly stated that it would have been much better if Diana had remained on the path of chivalry rather than trying to become a lady. When Diana carefully asked why she thought so, Regina replied that a girl with dirty blood could not be a true noble lady. Diana was stunned by such words and did not understand at all where Regina got such nonsense from and why she even allowed herself to say it. She knew perfectly well that her mother was Princess Adele, even if she was born to a king and a concubine, but that doesn't make Diana any worse. Diana asked Regina if she knew who her grandfather was because it had special meaning for her. And Regina answered with indifference that of course she knew it was the late king, but in her opinion, that didn't change anything about the essence of what was happening. Diana's mother was disowned by the entire royal family, who erased her from their circle as unworthy as if she had never belonged to them. Diana understood this, and that was precisely why Regina caused her constant internal rejection and irritation. Regina was the daughter of a viscount from a quiet and legal first marriage, and she was surrounded by stability from birth. Unlike her, Diana was born after a repeated forced life, where there was no place for warmth and privilege. The viscount openly showed an unequal attitude. While Diana was shedding blood on the battlefield, Regina lived without knowing any worries. Regina, surrounded by softness and comfort, enjoyed exquisite dishes and never knew hunger. During this time, Diana often balanced between life and death, forgotten by everyone and left to her own devices. Meanwhile, Regina enjoyed the glitter and luxury, not hesitating to adorn herself with expensive jewelry. Diana had one important question to ask her, and she asked if she really believed that the royal family had betrayed her mother. Diana never envied Regina's life, but her sister's behavior provoked anger because her authority and wealth came at someone else's cost. She said that if a mother could be thrown away, then a viscountcy was nothing more than a trash can, and then asked if Regina knew about marriages of convenience. After these words, Diana added that it would be useful to learn something useful, and then Regina screamed, forbidding anyone to call her sister. In the end, Regina really should have known what it meant to enter into a marriage of convenience rather than live in a world of dreams and illusions. Diana firmly declared that she was no longer going to call Agnes her sister, and Agnes, hearing this, hurried out of the room without saying a word or turning around. Diana was sure that she would never in her life acknowledge this naive and stupid girl as her sister, even if everyone around her insisted otherwise. After some time, a person entered the room. It turned out to be Baroness Willems, responsible for teaching girls manners and good manners lessons. The woman greeted Diana warmly, not hiding her joy, and introduced herself formally in a polite, slightly pompous voice. Diana was slightly surprised because she had never heard of this teacher or met her in person before. The father simply assigned a woman from an obscure family to her, without consulting her, as if his daughter's opinion in this matter meant nothing. The Baroness also insisted on politeness and expressed pleasure at meeting him, but her words sounded like pretense, almost like an obligation. Apparently they want Diana to give up on becoming a lady, and this was not the first indirect threat from their side. The problem was that at the most inopportune moment, she accidentally slipped and fell with a crash right in the middle of the room. Diana had never been taught anything like this before, and now she had to master etiquette as if she had been striving for it her whole life. The Baroness was not at all surprised to see Diana fall, as if she had expected something like this from her new student. Moreover, she even allowed herself a barely noticeable smile, as if the girl's fall was something ordinary and even funny. Perhaps Diana really should think about refusing because all this seemed pointless, alien, and unpleasant to her. The Baroness, despite everything, gently told Diana to try again since greetings are the basis of any small talk. The girl had a straight posture, and the Baroness noted this, adding that with such a body position, Diana would quickly learn everything. She needed to lift the front of her dress a little and carefully move one leg back as etiquette required. The Baroness never tired of repeating the instructions, asking the girl to perform the movements again and again, bringing them to perfection. Diana was constantly distracted or performed movements incorrectly, and at some point she began to do something completely different from what was required. The teacher patiently asked Diana to concentrate, but she was already starting to get tired of all this and could barely contain her irritation. Diana confidently stated that these shoes were a real test, and if she was allowed to wear something else, everything would turn out much better. She had never worn such shoes in her life, but Baroness Willems insisted that appearing in boots under a dress was simply unacceptable. First, she just needs to get used to the shoes because tomorrow they will meet again and continue their training. She hoped that this time Diana would be able to greet the teacher more correctly and politely without violating etiquette. The maid was completely confused when she looked at Diana, not immediately understanding what was happening to her. The girl seemed so depressed that the maid decided that something terrible had happened to her because she sat there completely gloomy. Diana said almost nothing and sank into complete silence, not answering any questions. The maid in the white dress waited but received no answer, and this made her even more anxious. Suddenly, Diana jumped up from her seat and shouted loudly that she would indeed succeed and that she would definitely cope. Gathering her courage, Diana stood up and reminded herself that it was only through her willpower that she became a commander. She believed that she could cope and began to repeat the required greeting out loud, step by step. The maid was stunned to the depths of her soul and did not expect such a sudden change and such determination from her. That day, the young lady behaved very strangely, and this immediately caught the attention of those around her. The next day, Diana looked confident enough to perform the required bow and greet properly. She was pleased with herself because she had been practicing in front of the mirror all night and practicing the movements without stopping. Baroness Willems, although she praised her, was convinced that Diana still needed to be taught a lesson for her behavior yesterday. However, Diana could not understand what exactly she was being accused of and why they were now looking at her with reproach. The teacher asked, if she does everything so skillfully today, then why did she allow herself to behave like that yesterday? She added that she hoped not to hear another nonsense about Diana learning everything overnight. Diana had absolutely no idea why she was saying this. After all, she'd said she should believe her, but now it seemed like she was just being polite. After these words, Diana looked closely at her heels and, frowning, noticed that the girl had a wound there, albeit a very small one. Diana explained that it happened because of her studies, and Baroness Willems asked in surprise why she hadn't called anyone for help, including her. The girl shrugged and added that it was just a scratch. She hadn't broken anything, so why make a fuss over such a trivial matter? The teacher couldn't believe the maids remained silent. Even after seeing the marks on her feet, no one said anything as if it were a normal occurrence. However, Diana replied that the maids had noticed everything, but she herself had refused help. She simply didn't want anyone to interfere. Baroness Willems was shocked by what had happened. She found it hard to believe such a thing could have been allowed, as it clearly went beyond the pale. Then the teacher began to have her own suspicions. Everything was beginning to take shape, shaping a darker picture than had initially appeared. Gradually, the Baroness began to realize that this girl was being openly neglected. Her position in this house was far more complex than expected. The fact that a simple woman far from high society was invited to teach a young lady, and the fact that no one was monitoring Diana's condition, all this was alarming. Baroness Willems ordered the maid to immediately call the doctor, and at the same time bring clean and soft slippers so that the lady could change her shoes. As soon as the doctor arrived, he took care of her legs and carefully treated each wound without saying a single unnecessary word. The teacher said that Diana needed to change her attitude towards herself. Her body was her own treasure, and she needed to treat it accordingly. She must protect herself from any injuries and think about the future. After all, perhaps her training was excessive and already damaging her health. Only then will its true value be fully revealed and properly appreciated by those who are able to see beyond appearances. She must also use any reasonable methods and approaches to stand out from other girls, especially in a society where everything is built on comparison. High society, according to Willems, is a real battle for girls and not always a fair one. Only those who can think strategically survive. Diana once ran away from her destiny, from the future that was meant for her, but now she finds herself back in the center of the battlefield, only in a different form. Etiquette teacher Willems asked Diana Resley if she was ready to take part in the war of high society and fight in this complex world of intrigue and power struggle. Diana replied that she thought it would indeed be interesting, and although she wasn't entirely sure, she still felt she had the strength to go through the ordeal. The girl was determined and confident, which is why teacher Willems was happy and felt hope that Diana had a chance to succeed. She said that she would help Diana so that she could be victorious in every battle she faced, despite all the difficulties and challenges. After these words, Willems offered Diana her hand, a gesture that she had not expected at such a moment, but it gave her strength and confidence. The girl also offered her hand in return and said that she hoped to live this month with dignity, showing everyone that she was capable of much. High society warfare was Diana's specialty, and she understood that she had to be prepared for whatever was in store for her and not buckle under pressure. At the royal palace of Adele, the royal family annually held a large banquet in honor of Orville Day, which brought together the most noble and influential representatives of the aristocracy. It was a party that all the kingdom's aristocrats were required to attend, as it was here that important matters were decided and new alliances were established. Under the guise of a place of friendship and harmony for high society, this event actually served as a battleground for hidden intrigues and struggles for influence. Instead of weapons, hypocrisy and false smiles were used here, hidden blows and disguises behind which lay hidden ambitions and dangerous games. If Diana were a sword in the hands of an experienced warrior, she would never doubt herself or her strength to confront her enemies for a moment. But in this world she was destined to become not a sword, but something more vulnerable, and this caused her inner heaviness and uncertainty. She opened the door and went outside. It was already quite dark, and the coolness of the night slightly enlivened her thoughts and feelings. Then Diana came closer to the window and wanted to look closely at what was happening behind the glass, trying to understand the essence of what was happening. There she saw a guy who immediately caught her attention. He seemed unusual to her and not quite suitable for this place. She couldn't understand why this particular man was here among the crowd of important and influential people. It was Kier Heyman from the Duchy, a young man with an enigmatic aura and unpredictable goals. This is the man who will become the commander of the army of the Heberunia Empire, the future leader on whom much depends. The next day, someone grabbed Diana's hand suddenly and sharply, causing her to flinch. She became frightened and turned her head to see the young man who said that it was so dangerous to stick her head out from behind the railing. He also asked where the young lady's guardian was showing concern and attention to her safety. It was Baru Kral, the kingdom's personal knight, who always kept order and protected his charges. Diana didn't know him personally, and that's why she was scared, because if she were like she used to be, everything would look completely different. Then the girl simply asked him to let her go, trying to act calm and confident. She needed to learn to behave like a real lady with dignity and composure despite her fear. Baru was surprised by this behavior and immediately apologized for the harshness of his actions. Then Diana turned her head and noticed that Kier was no longer nearby. Perhaps she just thought he was there. The knight apologized again and said that he himself did not notice how it all happened, and also added that it would be better for her not to walk here alone and to go to the banquet hall. Looking closer, Diana recognized Baru Krala. He was too young, and therefore she hardly recognized him at first. She had heard that he had held a low position for a long time, but she said that she would stay here on the stairs for a little while longer, and he replied that he would then stand on guard. They said he was unsociable, but with you he was on his way to a promotion. The main reason was completely different. Diana calmly stated that she was the second daughter of the distinguished Rasley family and that her name was Diana. She didn't go into detail, just stated it briefly but confidently. Then she curiously asked the man's name, and he without hesitation also introduced himself. He clarified that his family had no hereditary title, which immediately explained a lot. The fact that his family's title was not hereditary marked him as a commoner. This marked him as distinct from the aristocracy, and it was for this reason that he was never promoted despite his accomplishments. The man added that if Diana was bothered by his lineage, he could ask for someone else to appoint him, but she confidently replied that it didn't matter to her. After all, it's not the pedigree that defines a knight but his sword. Diana remarked with a slight smile that she would be honored to have such a worthy warrior stand guard at her side. These weren't empty words. She spoke sincerely. He looked a little embarrassed and, lowering his voice slightly, said that she was allowed to call him by his shortened name if she felt more comfortable doing so. It was an attempt to get closer to her. She sighed quietly and smiled faintly, as if these simple words meant something to her, as if she felt warm support. Inwardly, she was thinking that perhaps these were hard times for him and the path to regaining his prestige was difficult, but he still had to hold on and not lose heart. Because one day the day will come when other knights will admire him, and even aristocrats will bow their heads before his valor and tenacity. The man named Kier reminded them that they were not in their home kingdom, and therefore he had to be especially careful to avoid trouble. Kier admitted that it was he who insisted they come here. However, for Diana to be able to infiltrate the palace, there had to be a plan. Cyril was the second son of a duke from the Heberun Empire. One of the servants hearing of this quietly remarked that in that case the young man would likely not die a natural death. Despite everything, Kier was glad, because finally before him stood the one he had been searching for so long. In that moment, everything else lost its meaning. The servant standing nearby had absolutely no idea what the young master meant, but he didn't even bother to explain anything. He simply ignored the confusion. For Kier, the realization that Diana wasn't just a figment of his imagination was astounding. She truly existed in reality, and this wasn't a dream. He often dreamed of a woman whose face he could never see, but he always felt that she was someone important, close familiar in soul. And every time she took off her helmet in her sleep, luxurious red hair appeared before him, scattering over her shoulders like flames. In these dreams, she always said she was terribly tired of battles of pain of her life. It sounded bitter and true. But the amazing thing was that when he saw Diana in person, the strange, unknown thirst that tormented him from within disappeared. The thirst that had been building in him since he had regained his memories vanished as suddenly as it had appeared, as if it had been summoned just for her sake. For him, as for the earth cracked by the heat, Diana became a blessed rain, giving hope, meaning, and perhaps new life. After she disappeared, he continued to see her in his dreams, watching as she first dared to pick up a sword and step into battle. He relived her first battle, all her mistakes, victories and fears, as if he himself had been standing next to her that day. And one day he saw her last moment, a scene shrouded in darkness where her breathing was interrupted. He was there too, but completely out of his element, distorted, alien, as if deprived of his former self. The thirst that had been giving him no peace eventually turned into madness, clouding his mind and feelings. He looked into her eyes, and everything inside him sank when the question about the last word sounded. She didn't tremble, didn't beg for mercy. She just quietly asked him to end it with one precise blow. She was not afraid of death, but she could not bear pain. Her fear was to suffer. He wanted to save her, to hold her, but instead he only woke up as if nothing had happened. With her death, the dreams disappeared too. Every time he fell asleep, she was no longer there. But there remained a smile for which he was ready to sacrifice everything just to see her again. Then Kier approached Walter and quietly asked him for the dagger without explaining the reason. Walter was surprised, not understanding why Kier needed a weapon. After all, he wasn't going to fight anyone. But Kier simply took the dagger and cut his hair, wondering if he would be able to meet her again on the battlefield. Diana had no idea what the Duke was trying to say, as his behavior was unpredictable and not at all like ordinary politeness. However, he did not explain anything and simply stated that they were going to go back without specifying where or why. He was determined to meet her again no matter what, even if it meant learning to wield a sword all over again. The teacher warned in advance that today Diana would have a lesson devoted exclusively to theoretical foundations. During this lesson, the teacher suddenly asked Diana what it meant to be a real lady. Diana thought about it because before she thought that a lady was just a refined girl with good manners. But now she realized that a lady was not just a girl in a dress, but a noble person, graceful, majestic, and kind. Then the mentor explained that ladies are fragile creatures worthy of respect who need constant protection. Because, as she put it, noble girls are always under protection and should not suffer. This was important to understand, so she promised to ask the question again later to check the answer. When the mentor repeated her question, Diana without hesitation declared that she was Diana Resley, and that said it all. She noticed a strange expression on her mentor's face and decided that perhaps she had said something wrong. Therefore, she hastened to add that she is of course not just Diana, but a real lady, as befits her in this house. The teacher said that the girl did the right thing because no one in this house even tries to take her side or support her in difficult times. But the teacher herself won't be able to help her get into high society. She will have to learn to stand up for herself, and for this she cannot do without weapons. The teacher added that external beauty is also a weapon. Innate attractiveness is a rare gift for a lady, and it must be used skillfully. Those with red hair are especially prized. The girl asked the lady if she really had to follow all these rules. She didn't like her own hair at all. In the role of a knight, they were completely useless and brought no benefit. Moreover, they only got in the way, attracting unnecessary glances and unwanted attention from all sides. She suffered a lot of insults because of her unusual appearance. It won't happen again if you show her once that you won't allow yourself to be treated that way. Then the girl wondered, who will protect the lady herself when she one day leaves the walls of this estate? She honestly admitted that she did not know about this, and the teacher upon hearing this was surprised, and asked if she planned to get married in the future. The girl suddenly realized she hadn't thought about how to please people at all. The teacher reminded her that winning hearts is also an important art, and now her appearance could help her achieve it. The first step was to establish a relationship with Olga, the maid who was always nearby. The girl decided she had to make her side and trust her. Although Diana didn't want to delve into it, she remembered her promise to never pick up a sword again. That meant she needed another means of defense, even if it wasn't physical. That is why she admitted that she wants to figure out how to proceed further and understand what role she should now play. The teacher explained everything in detail, and when Diana returned to her room, thoughts of the future wedding were spinning in her head. The teacher was right. If she was neuro, she'd likely be married off in an arranged marriage. She'd never even considered such a fate before. Regina and the teacher were in the hallway. He was saying that if the lady remained so unprepared, they would have to stop the classes. Regina was scolded again and again. She couldn't hold back. She burst into tears from resentment and helplessness, as often happened to her. The teacher reminded her that he would check her assignment tomorrow and told her to prepare properly so as not to repeat today's mistakes. Idealna walked past Regina without even giving her a glance, as if her existence did not deserve any attention. But suddenly, the child turned to her, and then Diana, surprised, stopped and turned in his direction, not expecting this. Regina screamed, claiming she'd just smirked. Diana was nearly deafened by her sister's shrieks, and her ears nearly started ringing. She didn't understand what they were talking about. Her sister was again talking nonsense and barking like an angry dog, not giving her any peace. Regina yelled at her, insisting that this would have consequences, but Diana didn't respond. She was preoccupied with something completely different, thoughts about her future marriage. Deep down, she still wanted her future husband to be at least pleasant in appearance. At that moment, she noticed Olga. She was looking at her with a slight, almost childish smile. She immediately remembered that the first step was to contact the maid Olga. The main thing was to evoke sympathy. After all, she knew for sure, external attractiveness attracts attention. And if you add a little sadness to it, it awakens in people a desire to protect. This was precisely part of the rules that a true lady confident in her role and influence must follow. And then a convenient opportunity presented itself. Regina was saying something, clearly expecting a reaction, but Diana remained silent as if she hadn't heard. Then Olga came closer, looking warily, and carefully asked what was going on. What was troubling her mistress? Diana immediately feigned sadness, bowing her head and turning to Regina with a quiet sigh as if admitting her guilt. She said that it was all her fault, and this really scared Regina, making her wary. Diana continued in the same spirit, explaining that she had to help with everything and suddenly cringed as if in tears. And then she added that she tried to be a reliable support, but every time she failed, and she was terribly ashamed of it. Olga watched everything that was happening, amazed at how sincere her young lady looked. She decided that this was the kind of behavior that was worth imitating and indignantly pushed Regina against the wall. Regina felt like something had happened to her, like her mind had become clouded and she could no longer distinguish reality from her own fears. Diana understood that she had to be there and help because she had once vowed to herself not to abandon those who needed her. At that moment, Regina suddenly felt a cold horror. The expression on Diana's face truly frightened her. It wasn't just she who was scared. Even the maid shuddered when she saw the expression on her mistress's face. Strangely enough, despite everything, Olga's face seemed beautiful to her, as if she had found something special in it. After this, Regina suddenly burst into tears, unable to cope with the growing fear and embarrassment from Diana's behavior. Diana didn't mean to harm, but inside her the desire to protect was fighting with an inner horror. She increasingly blamed herself, thinking that somewhere she had made an unforgivable mistake that had ruined everything. She glanced at Olga, who looked at her very strangely, as if she didn't recognize her. She was embarrassed by the fact that Olga avoided looking at her, as if she was afraid to see the truth in her eyes. She couldn't understand what was going on, why everyone was suddenly looking away and not talking to her like before. But then Olga suddenly said that she felt a little better, as if the anxiety had receded. Hearing these words, Diana felt a warm wave of joy and sincerely thanked her silently. But Olga immediately added that there was no need to rejoice so much. Everything could still change. She had such a gloomy, almost threatening expression on her face that even the lady herself thought she had gone a little overboard. It is not surprising that the 12-year-old girl could not withstand such pressure and almost immediately began to tremble under her gaze. But Diana, despite everything, could not understand in what way exactly her actions were wrong or unfair. She was sure that Regina had harmed Olga, and she herself said that she didn't even want to remember it. One time she even found small, sharp stones in her food, which were clearly not placed there by accident. Another time, the old clothes she had carefully restored turned out to be damaged and torn. Small mishaps were constantly happening. Sometimes flowers were ruined, sometimes things were scattered, small, nasty things. Diana doubted whether the girl knew about this and recalled whether there was something similar in her past life. She firmly stated that evidence must be found, and then the offender must be dealt with once and for all. Olga restrainedly remarked to her that it was not at all appropriate for a lady to express herself in such a way, even if the matter was serious. But at the same time, Olga truly thanked her. One could feel her sincere appreciation. It never occurred to her that Diana could worry about her and care for her as if she were a close person. She also noticed that Regina reported everything to the master without hesitation, without embarrassment. She expected Diana to be scolded, but she didn't care at all. Even if everything didn't go according to plan, she was unmoved by the reproaches or condemnation. Everything that was happening suited her, and suddenly the butler announced that the gentleman wished to see the lady and conveyed this with his usual politeness. Diana nodded, calmly agreed, and followed him without hesitation, expressing neither surprise nor concern. The butler looked at her strangely, as if something in the girl's behavior was throwing him off his usual routine. Perhaps she was simply trying to hold on with all her might without showing any fatigue or the worries that were seething inside. She seemed not to resemble Lady Regina at all, but rather to resemble someone he had once known and respected long gone. He suddenly turned to Diana, and she couldn't understand what exactly he wanted to tell her before the meeting. He said he had something important to tell her before she went in to see her father, as if it really mattered. Apparently, the gentleman was now with Lady Regina, who had come to him yesterday, and apparently for a long time. He couldn't understand why his daughter was crying, and he had already mentally decided that he would stand up for her, even without knowing the details. When he realized that it was related to Diana again, he ordered her to be brought in immediately, not hiding his irritation. But Regina tried to stop this, saying that she was the only one to blame and that Diana had nothing to do with it and did not deserve punishment. It was because of her words that Diana was called "the butler said so," without adding any further explanation. He guessed that Diana had done nothing wrong, but he knew that Lady Regina had a strange habit of exaggerating and dramatizing everything. Although it would have been unfair, Diana should have apologized to the gentleman, even if she considered herself to be right in some way. Diana, smiling slightly, thanked him with sincere warmth for this wise advice, even if she still had some doubts inside. When she entered, the butler was so happy to see her that he could not contain his wild delight and smiled. He couldn't understand at what exact moment she changed so much and became so mature and self-confident. As soon as Diana appeared, her father immediately greeted her with a stern and intent gaze that made her feel uneasy. And Origin, as always, hid behind his back as if frightened, and at the same time continued to grin contentedly. She really did look charming, although she was unbearably irritating in her feigned innocence. Father said that Origin had already told him everything, and now he did not understand how Diana could treat her sister with disdain and threaten her. He couldn't understand where Diana got so much anger from, as if she had been storing it up inside all this time. Diana looked down and at some point realized that her words could have seemed like a threat, even if she didn't mean it. He then added that he needed to speak with Lady Willems, who was responsible for her behavior and etiquette lessons. He asked her sternly what she had just said, and Diana, in a reserved but firm tone, said she apologized. After this, he abruptly ordered Regina to immediately go to her room without giving her a second to object. He asked her to stay away from Diana and not to disturb her with her actions or words at that moment. When the girl left, Diana was confused and didn't know how to behave correctly and prepare herself for what was happening. After this, the father was embarrassed, but Diana pretended that nothing had happened and did not show her emotions. He asked where she got such knowledge, and the girl replied that she simply sincerely apologized, smiling. The father grabbed his head and said that it would be better not to show that smile to anyone again, because he was afraid of his own daughter. He reflexively began to look for a dagger and said that etiquette lessons were not suitable for her. It would be better to study swordsmanship. He was very surprised by her answer because she said that she was not going to take up fencing at all. His gaze became very dark and tense. He clearly expected a different decision. Nevertheless, he agreed and decided that this is what they would do. He gave her 2 months to prepare. During this time, she will have to master the basics of etiquette perfectly, because soon they will choose a maid for Princess Juliana. Therefore, he believes that his daughter should become a servant, and if she refuses, he will send her to the training ground. This damn Viscount is constantly coming up with new tests and tasks for her without end. She squeezed his hand tightly, deciding that she had taken an important step that would change her whole life and destiny in the future. Now she must become a servant to Princess Juliana, which will open up new opportunities and challenges. She walked slowly through the garden, easily jumping over a lying log as if overcoming internal doubts. She couldn't understand what strange thoughts were swirling around in her head, causing anxiety and doubt. It was her secret place, known only to her, where she found peace and comfort from all her problems. When her mother scolded her, she often hid here to get away from the harsh words and find some peace. She had absolutely no idea what to do next, how to become the princess's servant and cope with the task. In her heart, she didn't know whether she would be able to endure all this, or whether at some point she would break down and destroy everything. She had no sense of patriotism, no family, no close friends to stay by her side in difficult times. She was ready to betray the military secrets of the Empire just to avoid the fate that threatened her in the near future. She will need to take Olga with her so as not to leave her friend alone in danger and difficulties. The main problem was who would believe her words at all, because now she is just a little girl. She was sure that one person would definitely believe her, Kirill, although naive, but devoted to her to the end. This naive madman is a memory from the past, from the times of the war against the Empire, which are long gone. The mail came and they left a letter for her since she was the deputy captain responsible for important matters. The letter had no seal, so she could not immediately understand who sent it and why. The contents of the letter stunned her to the depths of her soul because there was something very important and unexpected in it. The letter spoke of a military secret of the Empire, and believing in its authenticity, she decided to act using the knowledge she had gained. It was later revealed that the source of the letter was Kaiman's detachment, which was commanded by Kirill's elder brother. She couldn't even imagine that he would use her, his enemy, to get rid of his own older brother. This man was ready to do anything for his goal, and that is why he decided that she could be trusted. But it's better to avoid crazy people like him so as not to get into trouble. If she suddenly comes face to face with him, it is better to run away immediately without looking back. Suddenly, her gaze fell on her hand where the power she had used earlier was clearly evident. She didn't understand what it meant, so she simply discarded the thought like an unnecessary branch. She suddenly blushed deeply, although she could not understand the reason for this excitement. She tried to convince herself that it was just her imagination, and that there was nothing strange. Perhaps she had vision problems and simply misinterpreted everything. After that, she used her power again, which glowed green, filling her with energy. She decided that she had imagined it all, and that she shouldn't dwell on it as if it were a simple deception of her consciousness or a dream. But soon she saw that a red dot had actually appeared on the paper which she had involuntarily drawn herself, and this surprised her. The girl was frightened, not understanding what it meant, and where such a strange sign came from, causing anxiety and misunderstanding in her. She always hated the color red, preferring the shades of her aura, which seemed calmer and more pleasant to her. Now her aura turned red, and she couldn't understand if it was because she had returned to the past and why such changes were happening to her. She decided that if she took up the sword again, she would forever lose her humanity and turn into something else. In that case, she would become a terrible monster, huge and unrecognizable, which frightened her and haunted her. The gentleman was very grateful for the recommendation of his viscountcy to the royal palace, which opened up new opportunities for him. As he had promised, he began preparing Diana so that she could pass all the tests with dignity and fulfill her role. He believed that gratitude was unnecessary, but he himself did not understand why everything was happening this way and what the true reason was. The man said that his daughter was not as smart and intelligent as he would like her to be, which made him feel anxious and doubtful. He feared that the chance given to him might be missed and wasted without the desired result and success. Perhaps if it had been his first daughter, she would have coped with the task much better and would have been able to carry out the assigned mission with dignity without losing a drop of honor. At the same time, he thoughtfully noted that he would like to say something else to the Viscount, hinting at the importance of additional details that could change the situation. It was on this day that he decided that this man would become her knight and would be a reliable support in any difficulties, ready to protect and support her. This man's name is Baru Kral, who had long since earned the trust and respect of their circles, being a tried and true ally. Baru expressed that it was an honor for him to serve her, and it was from that moment that their destinies became intertwined and they met again to begin a new chapter. Diana asked why Barrow was there and was interested in how things were going with the palace, since rumors are always full of mysteries and hidden truths. He admitted that he left his former place in order to become her knight, leaving behind all doubts and former ambitions. This decision was not an easy one because many were ready to do anything, even sell their souls to obtain such a lucrative position and status. Regina was deeply upset and could not understand why her father allowed such injustice because it seemed to him that he could not change anything. She simply couldn't believe that Diana had gotten a knight faster than her, and it haunted her as if a feeling of injustice was burning inside her. Diana also wondered why Barrow had made such an important decision, as it could have meant giving up many lucrative opportunities for him. She noted that it would be more profitable for the knight to remain in the palace, since the viscountcy did not promise any special advantages or advancement. He stated that he didn't care about this situation, as if it didn't exist at all, and it had no meaning to him despite the circumstances around him. She knew for sure that he belonged to a low class, and this was not hidden from anyone in their circle, which greatly influenced his fate and views. He was indeed fortunate that the previous evening near the royal palace, his comrade had been received with contempt and treated like the dregs of society, which had left a deep mark. The words she spoke at that moment were new to him, because never before had anyone spoken to him so directly and without embellishment, revealing their true feelings. She became the first person who appreciated him not by his origin, but by his personal qualities, by the way he handled a sword, and how he behaved ignoring class boundaries. It was then that he decided that he would serve only the one whose sword belonged to her, and this decision became an important guideline for him in the future. Previously, Diana also dreamed of being perceived not by her gender, but by her ability to wield a sword and be a worthy knight despite the prejudices of those around her. Therefore, she was close and understood what this knight was experiencing because she herself had gone through similar trials and understood his internal conflict. She sighed heavily and said that if he thought so, then she could not change the situation and could do nothing about it accepting the current situation. He knelt before her and was sincerely grateful for the understanding and attention she had shown him despite the circumstances. At that moment, Regina, the eldest daughter of the Viscount, approached them, introduced herself, and added that she was the daughter of an influential man in their society. Regina was determined that no matter that Kier had sworn allegiance to Diana, she would take him for herself. Now that they were one family, she hoped the knight would serve only her. To avoid any inconvenience, Regina planned to address him by name, and was confident that Kier himself would soon understand where he belonged and where his place was. She believed that Kier should realize for himself that being Regina's knight was better for him than serving Diana, since both she and Diana felt sorry for him in this regard. At first, Kier was silent, not expressing his opinion, but later he noted with a smile that one cannot simply call him by his name as if he were an ordinary person. Regina asked everyone to say that Diana went with him, emphasizing her right and trying to strengthen her influence over the knight. Diana thought that Kier wanted to take a closer look at everything here, and he confirmed that he would be glad to such a proposal, showing his consent. Regina burst into tears from resentment and jealousy because she really wanted to take the knight for herself and not allow him to serve someone else. For a lady, the ability to embroider was a mandatory skill, without which it was impossible to imagine a decent upbringing and behavior in society. Olga was surprised to learn that the lady had decided to take up embroidery today, as she had not previously shown any interest in this type of needlework. She smiled because she hadn't expected Diana to take up embroidery so seriously, and this filled her with some respect and a little surprise. Olga noticed the lady's confidence in her abilities and wished her luck and patience, knowing that with such an attitude, Diana would definitely succeed. Diana didn't understand why some of the words sounded slightly offensive, but she didn't pay much attention to it, trying to concentrate on the new task. She decided to take a break from all her worries and simply learn to embroider in order to develop this essential skill and feel more confident. She picked up the needle and summoned all the strength in her hands to pierce the fabric without fear of tearing it. It required concentration and precision to make everything neat and even. As she stood up, it became clear that she was doing things a little wrong. Her movements were awkward and something about it still didn't look quite right. Back then, survival wasn't as difficult and dangerous as it is now. Back then, a needle didn't dig into the table with such force, and everything seemed simpler, though it still required attention. She didn't even notice how she accidentally released her aura, although she should have calmed down and remembered that she was not at war and was not opposing anyone now. Little by little, she tried to stay calmer and made another attempt to make it better, concentrating on every detail and movement of her hands. After many attempts, when fatigue began to take its toll, she finally felt joy. Her first real success made her smile. Finally, she succeeded, and Diana was immensely happy and proud of herself because this was her first embroidery done by hand without mistakes. This time, the fabric remained intact and there were no holes. The work was neat, which added confidence and inspiration for further training. Diana Riley proudly completed her first embroidery project, feeling something change inside her and a desire to improve further. Working hard under the close supervision of Baroness Willems, she gradually learned the true art of being a real lady, even if it required a lot of effort and patience. But as usual, the teacher declared that she had no soul, and these words hurt Diana, leaving a feeling of bewilderment and slight resentment inside. Diana didn't quite understand what was meant, and then the teacher explained that the mistress was too assertive for a lady, and she needed to learn to be softer and calmer. The gait was more reminiscent of a knight, but with a slight carelessness like a weightless cloud, which was surprising, and a little out of keeping with the usual notion of nobility. The teacher noted that true aristocrats walk easily and naturally as if a feather barely touches the ground, and this makes their gait special, graceful, and unnoticeable. The steps of such people resembled the smooth flapping of a butterfly's wings, light, airy, barely perceptible as if they were not just walking, but fluttering above the surface. But correct posture alone was not enough to achieve such lightness. Even the most rigorous training and repeated attempts could not correct this. The teacher hoped that the lady understood the essence of her words and grasped the subtle nuances that were important for true noble behavior. However, Diana admitted that she did not understand the explanations and suggested that the lesson be stopped for today, feeling some fatigue and misunderstanding in her heart. For Diana, it was both surprising and difficult to master the art of walking like a real lady. It seemed like real suffering, a complex and incomprehensible process. At that moment, she noticed Regina, her sister, walking in the distance down the corridor, her gait seemingly flawless and natural without any visible effort. Regina had exactly that lightness and grace that she wanted to emulate, and Diana couldn't help but think about learning from her. She decided to strive for lightness, to be like a feather, to repeat the smooth flapping of butterfly wings, which symbolized the ideal of grace. Suddenly, she realized that besides Regina, there was another role model, one that for some reason she had forgotten or did not want to remember. Diana could not understand how this happened, because this woman was the most impeccable lady she had ever known and respected. It was their mother, a real princess who knew perfectly well and strictly observed all the subtleties and rules of royal etiquette. Her mother was a model of nobility and grace, and Diana realized that she was the one she should strive to emulate in order to become truly worthy. She wondered how her mother had once walked. It had been so long ago that the memories seemed vague and hazy, barely perceptible in her mind. She tried to recall at least something that connected her to her mother. She tried to remember everything that concerned her mother, details, words, movements, facial expressions, in order to put them together into a complete image and feel her nearby, at least in her thoughts. She turned her body completely in the direction she intended to go, as if trying to repeat a familiar route to feel the familiar sensation of step and movement. She straightened her shoulders and took measured small steps, as if trying to capture the rhythm and gait characteristic of her mother in order to resemble her in her movements. It was important for her to completely copy every movement that she had once seen in her mother in order to get closer to her image and feel that connection that might remain invisible. Only then could she become like her mother, feel closer to her, and understand how exactly she moved, lived, and existed in this world. The Empire of Heberunya, the Arch Duchy of Haman. Important events unfolded here, and everything that happened had enormous significance for the main characters and the fate of this land. The servant quickly ran to His Highness, who did not understand the reason for the noise and shouting, because he had already asked to maintain silence and not run around the palace unnecessarily. The man explained that something incredible had happened involving the second young gentleman, which had caused immediate alarm and concern. But the gentleman did not listen to the details, and hearing Kirill's name, assumed that he had again done something strange and crazy, and expressed his determination to personally deal with it. However, the servant insisted that things were different, and suggested that the master personally look into the situation to verify the truth and understand what was really going on. Everyone was amazed when they saw that the master of Molda, despite his duties, was still holding a sword in his hands, which looked unexpected and strange to those around him. The gentleman appeared and was confused, not understanding what exactly the young man was doing, because his actions seemed to him not entirely appropriate and incomprehensible. The events took place in the Archduchy of Haman, within the Heberunya Empire, where order and status always played an important role in everyone's life. Kirill, being the second son of the Archduke, was distinguished from childhood by his outstanding intelligence and quick wit, which made him noticeable among his peers. However, his physical condition left much to be desired. His body was weak, which prevented him from fully participating in the ordinary affairs of the nobility. This was explained by a thirst of unknown origin, which apparently took away his strength and had a negative impact on his health. Because of this, Kirill became a very sensitive and irritable person for whom the slightest difficulties became a serious test. Eventually, when his patience reached its limits, it manifested itself in eccentric behavior that surprised and even frightened those around him. The gentleman asked Kirill what he did, but did not receive a clear answer since the young man himself did not know what to say in response. The servant tried to explain the situation in more detail, but his words were unconvincing and failed to clarify the matter for the master. Then the gentleman turned around and demanded that Kirill follow him into the office for a more serious conversation. At this point, the servants realized that the young people probably had problems that would have to be resolved as soon as possible. The gentleman noted that he did not know why the girl chose to study swordsmanship with Kirill, which seemed like a very strange choice. However, he wanted to emphasize one thing, that the sword was most likely not meant for Kirill, and it would be better for him to seek other paths in life. Considering he ended up in this state simply from climbing up to the 4th floor, it's understandable how exhausted and tired he was. His physical condition required attention and understanding. He was truly exhausted, so much so that he could barely breathe after climbing up to the 4th floor. The grueling effort had taken a toll on his well-being and energy. The gentleman reported that the home tutor he'd ditched had sent a letter of complaint. He wondered what exactly had caused the dissatisfaction this time. The boy explained that he did not want to study with this tutor because he believed that he already knew enough and did not need his lessons. He was sure that the man had nothing new to teach him, and so he refused to continue his studies. One day, the boy gave the teacher some books, but the teacher didn't seem to understand what kind of objects they were or why they were needed. The guy tried to explain that these were books, but the tutor couldn't figure out why they were given to him, and for what purpose. He added that if the teacher still has a negative opinion even after he has read these books, he should write him a letter which he will definitely respond to. His Highness expressed himself in this way because he considered the Duke's second son to be a self-confident boor, incapable of showing due respect to his elders and behaving appropriately. While listening to him, the young man's ears almost fell off from indignation. He could not understand how one could act like that in such a situation because it seemed unfair and incomprehensible to him. Then the father thought that his son really wanted to learn from him, to gain experience and to prepare for the responsibility that the heir to the ducal title might bear. These words signified the father's intention to declare Kirill his successor so that he would take on all the obligations and duties associated with the duchy. However, Kirill himself rejected this idea and made it clear that he did not want to study with his father and did not want to accept this role, which came as a surprise to everyone. The father was completely perplexed and irritated by his son's refusal, and he in turn asked why his father was so angry and did not understand his position. Kirill didn't understand what his father wanted from him. It seemed that he had even forgotten his son's name as a child. So different were their views and understanding of each other. Since childhood, he had been called a little monster, and this nickname reflected his rebellious and difficult character, which was difficult to get along with. The father understood this perfectly well because he himself had often called his son this way and raised him in the spirit of severity and strictness, sparing neither words nor actions. In response to his son's words, the father chose to remain silent, not wanting to continue the argument, and only watching the developments with disbelief and disappointment. Kirill, seeing this, declared that with his permission he would simply leave, not wanting to remain in this situation any longer and experience the pressure that was oppressing him. He didn't understand what was so special about the title of Duke. For him, it was just shackles and extra responsibility that did not bring joy and freedom. Kirill decided that this matter should be handled by his older brothers, who in his opinion were much better prepared for such responsibilities, and he himself did not want to interfere in it. The servant met the young gentleman in the corridor, and noticing him immediately asked what had happened, and why he had appeared so unexpectedly. She thought that the owner had probably scolded Kirill properly, and now he might stop training, after which she asked which library the master would like to go to. But Kirill didn't react to the servant's words and calmly replied that he was heading to the training ground since their classes weren't over yet. What irritated him most was his physical weakness, and he decided to squeeze all his strength out of himself to become stronger. There was no other way. There was no other way. In addition, the servant said that she had a question for His Highness, and Kirill replied that he was ready to listen without showing much interest. She asked why the young master had suddenly become so eager to learn the art of the sword when previously he had preferred other more sedate pursuits. The young gentleman was always immersed in books, constantly walking with his nose in texts, as if in another world, shutting himself off from everything around him. Except for time for eating and sleeping, he spent almost all his free time among books, immersing himself in knowledge and forgetting about training and sports. Then Kirill winced slightly and said that he would like to ask Walter something as his servant and faithful assistant. He asked him if he would believe his eyes if he met the girl from his dream in reality, so unreal and unusual. If she really existed, Walter could not understand what exactly the gentleman was talking about, remaining confused and bewildered. Kirill expressed his opinion that he personally didn't care whether anyone believed it, but she truly loved her sword, and that was obvious to him. This feeling undeniably connected her to the weapon she never wanted to abandon. Walter couldn't believe his master was seriously expressing such thoughts. He was astonished and even a little dumbfounded, as such conversations seemed frivolous and strange for a man of his position. He noticed that it was precisely because of this conversation that Kirill went to Arius, as if things were taking an unexpected turn, and this seemed completely illogical and inexplicable. Walter asked the man to give him some kind of answer, but the guy simply told him to shut up without going into details, as if he wanted to end the conversation and leave everything as it was. Walter tried to figure out what to do next, but he didn't get up and remained indecisive, not knowing how to act correctly in the current situation, which complicated the matter even more. Kirill was sure that she belonged to him by right, and if they lived in the same country, he would definitely try to win her favor with the help of sweets, a sword, or any other way he could get her attention. But now, everything was different, and Kirill didn't know what to do next. The complications only grew, and Walter believed the young gentleman had completely lost his mind, behaving so unpredictably and strangely. Eventually, Kirill decided that he should use the double dot perhaps as some kind of code or secret sign to clarify his intentions, or as part of a plan he had in mind. After this, she said that he would definitely grab her, showing persistence and leaving her no chance to escape, as if foreshadowing an inevitable collision. Kirill said that he was giving his servant a 10-minute break so that he could rest and collect his thoughts before continuing further actions. Walter would like to warn the unknown girl that she had better run and not look back, because ahead of her there were only difficulties and dangers from which she should escape as quickly as possible. Diana was suddenly hunted, and even her ear itched from the conversations behind her back, recalled with interest and apprehension. This feeling of unease never left her for a moment. The young people nearby were talking to each other quietly, discussing what was happening around them and sharing their thoughts on the news they had just heard. At some point they noticed that the princess had gone out for a walk, her graceful figure easily standing out against the background of the surrounding nature, and the people who barely had time to turn around to follow her. The princess looked very elegant, as if her every movement was thoughtful and easy, creating a feeling of harmony and beauty that was impossible to miss. One could easily assume that the king was proud of his daughter because she looked exactly like that, dignified and regal like a symbol of her kingdom. Juliana Adele was the only princess of the Adele kingdom. Her image was synonymous with grace and nobility, and she herself was a living reflection of the greatness of her land. Suddenly someone addressed the princess, and she turned and looked in the direction of the stranger, intrigued by what had attracted her attention at that particular moment. It turned out to be a girl with pink hair who called Juliana's sister, addressing her with surprising warmth and closeness, despite the different circumstances. The girl immediately greeted His Highness, showing respect and tenderness, as if there was an invisible connection between them, understandable only to the two of them. The princess noticed Agnes, and admitted that she was surprised to meet her, as she had not expected to see her here. The girl replied that she had come specifically to meet her, and knew that the princess would be here as rumors about her had already spread. Agnes Adele, the king's illegitimate daughter, made the princess think about how quickly news could travel, and she noted that information did travel very quickly, especially when it concerned important people. Agnes remarked that her sister was incredibly lucky, because if she lived in a palace she could always beat her at games. She sincerely regretted not living in such a place herself. Agnes also admitted that she is very envious of her older sister because life here seems truly wonderful and amazing, and she dreams of someday finding herself in the same conditions. If Agnes lived here, they would spend time together every day playing and having fun, and she hoped that Juliana shared the same opinion and wanted the same. After this, Agnes decided to ask her father whether it was worth speaking about it out loud and discussing the possibility of her moving, or at least finding out his opinion on the matter. I wonder how her father will react to her request. This thought increasingly occupied Agnes, and she began to wait for the answer with some excitement and hope. In a conversation with Julia, she decided to find out how she would perceive such an initiative and whether she was ready to support her in her desire to change something in their lives. Julia suggested that Agnes's mouth might be very dry in the city, and she might like a cup of tea to refresh herself and feel better. However, Agnes replied that everything was fine, and she did not need tea, but Julia still noted that her sister talked a lot, and because of this, she was worried that she would not damage her vocal cords. Agnes was delighted to hear Julia's concern, and was delighted that the princess was so concerned about her health and well-being. She was genuinely proud to be associated with such a kind and considerate person, and this gave her strength and confidence in the future. She announced that she intended to visit Julia again another time, but hadn't yet specified when exactly that would be. This left a bit of intrigue surrounding the next meeting, which was still to take place. After this, the princess turned to Margaret and said that the next time she found herself in the palace, they should choose another place for a walk in order to change the environment and avoid accidental encounters. They decided to change the location of their walk, choosing a different garden to make the meeting more private and comfortable, despite all the difficulties that could have arisen with the previous option. However, after this, they continued their walk as if nothing unusual had happened, maintaining an outward calm and normal relationship with each other. Julia disliked Agnes very much, although there were many reasons for this, and her feelings of hostility were obvious to those around her, which affected the atmosphere in their surroundings. Moreover, Agnes's maid was supposed to be Diana Resley, if I was not mistaken, and this caused additional complications in the relationship between them. The maid confirmed this information, adding that she was the second daughter of Vic Natar, and perhaps she had family ties with Agnes, which made the situation even more confusing. She was the daughter of HRH Princess Vivian, and her father, in order to hide his daughter's true status, married her off to a viscount, which spoke of the strict rules and severity in the family. Moreover, this woman was the second wife in the family, which added new nuances to the family drama and complicated relationships within the circle of relatives and close friends. Julia was so shocked by this news that she could hardly pronounce a word and asked several times to make sure she understood everything correctly. The etiquette teacher expressed pride in Diana as she became the princess's maid, which was a prestigious position and added to her respect among others. The teacher noted that all the time she taught Diana, it was not in vain. Her efforts and patience bore fruit, and this was noticeable even in her behavior and manners. However, Diana decided that the teacher was simply flattering her and did not take the compliments too seriously, believing that she had not yet achieved the ideal. In fact, everything that Diana has achieved has only been possible thanks to her constant perseverance and hard work, without which the result would have been completely different. The teacher said that this progress was a real miracle, the most serious challenge that Diana had given herself in her entire life, and it was truly impressive. In any case, Diana has now truly become a worthy young lady whose level of upbringing and manners deserves respect and recognition. A servant and her princess are a place of honor and the beginning of a long journey, so for Diana it will be an excellent starting point in a new life. Diana promised to remember this advice, and the teacher said that it was time already, otherwise she would be late, and it would be better to hit the road quickly. The knight accompanied Diana, and she said that she was ready to leave, sensing the importance of the moment and the upcoming changes. The teacher wished Diana a successful journey, wishing that everything would work out for the best in her future life. Regina ran up to her father and asked if he was really going to send Diana to the palace, not understanding the reasons for such a decision. She could not understand why Diana had to go to the palace and not herself, because she thought it was unfair and inexplicable. Regina thought that some kind of mistake had occurred and hoped that the situation would soon become clear and change in her favor. She expressed doubt that Diana might not be able to handle the princess and make a mistake as a relationship with her required caution and attention. Her anxiety was evident in every word. However, the father insisted that the decision had already been made final and was not subject to change or discussion, leaving little hope for a reconsideration or compromise on this issue. Despite her attempts to talk and persuade, she was met with complete indifference from her father, who simply stopped paying attention to her words and feelings. In despair, she sank to the floor, her hands beating on the ground, expressing her inner crisis and powerlessness in the face of a decision she could not change. At this time, the lady was riding in a carriage, silently looking out the window, immersed in her thoughts, which revolved around the upcoming meeting and its meaning. Kier, noticing the tension, asked Diana if she was worried before the important meeting, trying to support and encourage her. He reminded her that she would soon see the princess, which could be either a source of excitement or a cause for hope depending on her mood. Diana looked down and admitted that she was a little nervous because the palace had become almost like a home for her, but still it was not the same severity and complexity as on the battlefield. The knight tried to calm her down, saying that she shouldn't worry too much because the princess was a very kind and understanding person with whom she should be sincere. As they approached the palace, the knight noted that Diana was a very mature girl, although her experience was not yet comparable to the deep understanding that comes from those who have lived longer. However, he acknowledged that she was clearly older and wiser than her peers, and this helped her cope with tasks that many found overwhelming. She was many years old, and she already had a rough idea of the kind of person Princess Juliana stood before her. This knowledge made her want to keep her distance to avoid unnecessary problems and complications. Diana tried to keep her distance from the princess, fearing becoming embroiled in court intrigues. Her instinct told her it was best not to get involved with such high-ranking figures unless absolutely necessary. Soon, the senior maid approached her, accompanied by the princess herself. They showed interest in Diana, preparing to tell her about her new duties and her future life at court. The head maid said she would tell Diana about her duties as the princess's handmaiden. However, first she wanted to inspect the room and its surroundings. The maid carefully inspected the premises to see if it met the princess's requirements and expectations, and decided that Diana's clothes should also be up to par. She noted that Diana's clothes were quite appropriate and in line with court standards, but she also emphasized that in the future she would always need to dress neatly and follow her advice. The senior maid emphasized that Diana's appearance would also determine the princess's reputation, since the maid is her face at court and she must always look impeccable. She reminded that Diana's reputation directly affected the honor and position of Her Highness, and the maid must always remember this, exercising caution in every step. The maid sternly warned Diana that she must never forget her responsibility and must always behave carefully so as not to harm either herself or the princess. After these words, the maid informed the princess that her new maid, Lady Diana, had arrived ready to begin her duties and help Her Highness. The princess approved of Diana's entry, thereby giving permission for their work and acquaintance to begin expecting proper behavior from the new servant. Diana could now see Princess Juliana herself. Her appearance was impressive and commanded respect, while simultaneously causing a slight nervousness in the new servant. The princess smiled, expressing her pleasure at meeting him. Her greeting was warm, and she made it clear she was pleased to make his acquaintance and was ready to cooperate. Juliana introduced herself by mentioning that she had been a very beautiful woman in her youth, which added a certain elegance and dignity to her image. Diana replied that she was the Viscount's second daughter and was delighted to welcome such an important flower of the empire as a princess. She was thrilled to be with the Viscount for the first time. The princess asked Diana to look up, hinting at the importance of confidence and dignity. She had no close friends or relatives, so meeting Diana was especially important to her. She added that despite the absence of family, she was very happy about this meeting, and a strong friendship could develop between them since they are related by blood. Diana also hoped for friendship, realizing that being related to the princess was a chance to build a strong and trusting relationship in this complex world of the court. She hoped that a real friendship would develop between them, that they would be able to understand each other and become close despite all the differences and circumstances that surrounded them. And she considered this very important. For her, this was a big part of the new changes and an opportunity to feel needed and accepted in this new world. After this, Juliana explained that everything was happening this way because she had just drunk tea, and this moment became the reason for the beginning of their communication and exchange of thoughts. A second later, Diana felt something unusual, elusive, as if Princess Juliana herself was radiating some special energy and inner light. Diana also noted that she would like to be called simply Diana, without unnecessary formalities and titles, so that there would be sincerity and simplicity between them. Her interlocutor, of course, did not object to this, and a warmer and more trusting relationship was immediately established between them. Juliana expressed a desire to have a tea party soon to bring everyone together and spend time in pleasant company, and she wanted Diana to be invited. She sincerely wanted Diana to be present at this event because she considered her an important part of the social circle and an interesting person. This was a great honor for Diana, and she happily agreed, realizing that this way she would be able to get to know the people around her even better and feel like part of the team. Then Juliana said that this was wonderful because she was going to introduce Diana to everyone else, to help her get used to it faster and make new friends. At that moment, the princess looked like an ordinary girl again, without any titles or rules, just cheerful and lively like a sparkling ray of light. After work, when Diana returned to the Resley estate, the maid could not resist asking how her first day at work went, showing genuine interest and concern. Diana turned to Olga and replied that everything had gone well, that she felt comfortable, and was already beginning to get used to her new responsibilities and surroundings. Olga's gaze was heavy and a little strange, and Diana couldn't understand what exactly was bothering her, why that gaze seemed so burdensome and tense. Olga admitted she was very curious and wanted to know how everything went, whether the lady enjoyed the meeting and what she thought of it. Her curiosity was noticeable and sincere. She tried to understand who this princess was and where exactly they met, noting that the princess seemed very friendly and open to her. She was especially interested in the look with which all this was perceived. She wanted to understand what was hidden behind that expression in the eyes. Olga mentioned that at that moment she felt a certain discomfort, but she hoped that the lady would be able to sort it out and come to terms with this feeling herself. Diana in response said that it was not that important and simply invited Olga to tea to switch to more pleasant topics. Olga was amazed and even asked again whether there would really be a tea party in the palace, because it seemed to her something incredible and amazing. She noted that Lady Diana was very lucky to have received such an invitation, but Diana herself did not even know how to respond to it. Her thoughts were elsewhere. She felt tired and dreamed of getting some rest as soon as possible, putting all her worries and thoughts aside for later. The maid quickly left the room and closed the door, but Olga asked to open it back so she could continue the conversation and not remain in a confined space. Olga wanted the lady to reveal some more details, but Diana was immersed in her own thoughts and did not respond immediately. She was sure that at that moment her feelings were real, and it didn't just seem to her that something actually happened. Meanwhile, the maid approached the princess with a question, wanting to clarify an important detail to help her understand the current situation. She noticed that the princess had given Lady Diana the wrong tea time, which surprised her somewhat. It seemed the schedule had been miscalculated, which could lead to misunderstandings. Julia agreed that the maid was right and acknowledged her own oversight. She thought she should send someone to warn them of the changes, so that they wouldn't make a mistake and everything would go smoothly. But the princess insisted that no further action was necessary. She stood firm, explaining that she would handle the situation herself and that no outside intervention was necessary. The maid could not understand why this was happening, and the princess, standing up, declared that this particular girl should become her confidant and earn the trust of those closest to her. She explained that high society is filled with intrigue and complex situations that require recognition and management, so the girl must pass the test. A girl, while performing the duties of a servant, always had to cope with difficulties independently, without creating unnecessary problems, and maintaining order around. The maid understood that the princess was counting on her independence, and after these words, she was simply released, left alone with a new responsibility. This act seemed strange, since the princess usually made balanced decisions that rarely caused doubt among those around her and her servants. This time the maid saw the princess from a different side for the first time. There was something unusual in her behavior that caused anxiety and questions. The next day, preparations for the event seemed to go smoothly without any particular problems, giving hope for a flawless tea party. The princess personally arrived to ensure with her own eyes that everything was organized correctly and that no mistakes would occur during the event. She noted that this was the first tea party she had ever hosted herself, and she had high hopes for it. There couldn't be the slightest mistake. It was said that the lady need not worry, all problems had been resolved, and preparations had been thought out so that the event would go smoothly and without any problems. The only risk would be the maid's lateness, which could ruin the course of an important event and upset the mood of the guests present. It was quite interesting to imagine the maid's expression when she finally arrived. It could add lightness and smiles to the overall atmosphere. The princess was pleased that the preparations were going smoothly. It was important to her that everything went perfectly, that the guests were satisfied, and that the reception met high standards. In addition, they were assisted by a lady specially sent by the princess, which inspired confidence that little things would not spoil the overall impression. Hearing this, the princess was surprised and wanted to know who exactly helped, as she was curious about who had provided such support in the preparations. The maid replied that it was Lady Diana who was nearby and actively participated in all the affairs, which caused the princess mixed feelings and surprise. It was Diana Resley, but the princess did not understand how she could have ended up here because it was a surprise to her and a mystery that she wanted to solve. Diana noticed that the princess was looking at her intently, as if trying to understand why she was there and what she was doing in this place at this moment. She saw Her Highness approach and nodded in her direction, thus showing respect and confirming her presence and interest. Diana remarked that the weather was simply wonderful today, and the princess immediately asked how Diana ended up there and why she had appeared now. Diana explained that she had mixed up the time and was almost late, but in the end everything worked out well and she managed to arrive on time, which made her very happy and reassured her. She arrived early to see the palace gardens in daylight. She wanted to appreciate the beauty of the green alleys and flowers while the surroundings were still quiet and peaceful. This was important to her. It turned out that her goal was to see this very garden, which was a special place in the palace. The princess wasn't going to believe everything she was told and expected to see everything with her own eyes, verifying the truth. Suddenly, she felt angry and sensed someone standing behind her. She had no idea who it could be, but she felt a sense of danger and irritation from this unexpected situation. Perhaps she was confused because the situation hadn't turned out as she'd planned. All her calculations had gone awry, and now she had to quickly find a way out of the mess. Apparently, the princess genuinely believed Diana would fall for her ruse. She hoped her plan would work and her rival would fall into her power. However, Diana was no newcomer. She had lived in the palace for over 20 years as a royal knight and knew how to deal with such tricks and intrigues. Earlier, one of the maids asked Diana why she was leaving so early today, since there was still a lot of time left before tea and she could have stayed. Diana replied that it was just her habit to leave early. She promised to be back that evening and everything would be as usual without any unnecessary suspicions. Being the only woman in the palace attracted intense attention, but not always pleasant. Everyone was constantly watching her, trying to discern her intentions. Of course, the attention wasn't the best, but over time, Diana learned to tolerate it. She had to wake up earlier than everyone else and work harder to prove her worth. To ensure no one had the slightest reason to find fault, she approached them herself and asked if the maids were getting ready to begin. It was important that everything proceed without a hitch or questions. The maids replied that everything would be ready soon as the start was near, and there was very little time left to prepare. Everything went according to plan, and no one fell behind schedule. Diana asked how she could help, as that was the only way she could get ahead of her rivals. Her help was always timely, and for the princess's sake, she even provided small cookies as a token of care and support. The princess looked angry and tense at first, but she still took the cookies with restraint, as if trying not to show her emotions, although inside she was overcome by a complex mixture of feelings. She, in her opinion, would need at least 20 years to be able to surpass Diana, so strong and self-confident was she, no matter how difficult it was to admit it. When the other guests arrived, the princess felt grateful that they had taken the time to come to her and paid attention to her despite other events and commitments. Many of the girls started talking and saying that they were seeing this red-haired girl for the first time, and how she stood out from everyone else did not go unnoticed. They decided that this was most likely the princess's new servant, and that she still had a lot to learn. But it was immediately clear that she was special. Everyone was interested in where this sweet girl came from, what her family circle was, because now she already seems charming, and what will happen to her next intrigued everyone. After this, the princess asked the guests to focus on her for a minute, as she wanted to announce important news and attract attention to herself at that moment. She announced that this girl was Diana Resley, the second daughter of Viscount Resley, and that she had recently become her servant, which was news to everyone and a reason to pay special attention to her. Diana expected a warm welcome, as these people were supposed to be her friends. She was delighted to meet everyone and introduced herself despite a slight shyness and modesty. Everyone around them was also delighted to meet her, especially when they noticed she was the Viscount's daughter. Their glances expressed interest and respect for the young lady, which gave the meeting a special significance. Despite her young age, the girl already possessed a graceful demeanor. This impressed those around her, demonstrating that she had been well-mannered and accustomed to courtly manners from childhood. However, Diana understood that she still had much to learn. She hoped for help from her new acquaintances in mastering the intricacies of court etiquette and was prepared for hard work and diligence. In addition, her modesty and gentle nature made her especially attractive, and she believed that this would help her make friends among those around her. All attention was focused on Diana when the princess intervened, remarking that she too had been surprised by her behavior and manners, which added a new note of respect to the conversation. Diana's manner of speech and style resembled the behavior of a true knight, which caused admiration and surprise among the listeners, because this is rarely seen among girls. One of the ladies remarked ironically that it was more of a joke since the lady didn't quite look like a knight, but if you looked closely, you could actually see something knightly in her. Her elegance was noticeable in everything, in her movements, her posture, and of course in her perfectly fitting dress, which emphasized Diana's sophistication and good taste. Her manner and tone of speech spoke of a true lady, but for some reason it seemed as if she was not just learning etiquette, but also swordsmanship, which added a touch of mystery to her image. The others couldn't understand how such a refined girl could wield a sword because her skin was pale, without traces of a tan, and regular training in the sun usually left other marks. Diana spent most of her day studying etiquette, delving into the rules and customs that would help her become a proper lady at court, while not forgetting her inner doubts. Diana was already starting to get irritated with Princess Juliana, who had gone home that evening. The girl felt extremely tired after a busy day, and this didn't improve her mood. The knight showed interest in how Diana's first tea party went, trying to understand how comfortable she was in her new society and how the princess treated her. He was sure that the princess had taken proper care of her, so there was no need to worry about it because Juliana's kindness seemed obvious. The man noted to himself that the princess was indeed very kind, and he hoped that his opinion would be correct, since such qualities were important to all of them. But Diana herself did not agree with this description. She was completely shocked that the knight could think such a thing because, in her opinion, Juliana was not at all kind. He decided that he also deserved some harsh actions in response from the princess, so that he could feel that she really felt for him and was not just playing a role. This seemed strange because in her past life the princess had a completely different character, softer and calmer, and perhaps that was why Juliana felt hostility towards Diana. Diana could not understand the reason for this attitude because they had just met, and Juliana had no reason to hate or treat her badly. She firmly decided that this could not continue, and that something had to change, otherwise the situation would only get worse, and it was impossible to live under such stress. If she's kicked out, her father will start repeating again that he knew nothing good would come of it. He'll complain that he barely managed to get her settled in the yard, and now she's been kicked out too quickly. He'll be dissatisfied that he put in the effort, but she couldn't hold on, which is why everything is now falling apart. Her father will accuse her of irresponsibility and feel that she hasn't lived up to his expectations. In the end, he'll throw the sword to her, tell her she's a disgrace to the family, and wonder why she doesn't listen to his advice and orders. These words will shatter her inner world, but she's already made her decision. She decided she couldn't sit back and wait for someone to teach her floriculture and other unimportant things. She wanted to change the situation and take action, even if it meant going against her father's wishes. To do this, she needs to get the princess to side with her and support her. Without the support of the higher circles, her plans have no chance of success, and she understands this perfectly well. At the Resley estate, Diana turned to Olga for advice, hoping to find help and support in this matter. Her goal was to establish contact with the princess through those close to her. She told Olga that she needed to show interest and understand what was truly important to girls her age in order to understand how best to approach the princess. Olga looked closely at Diana, who asked what girls the same age as the princess liked. She wanted to understand what topics and interests could be used to build rapprochement. Olga noticed that Diana was actually talking about herself since she was the same age as the princess, and this helped establish a trusting conversation between them. However, Diana did not know exactly what was popular among girls at the moment, and then the maid suggested that certain things had recently become very popular among young girls. In particular, these were romance novels which became increasingly popular and discussed among their circle. These books were popular not only among ordinary girls like Olga, but also among young aristocrats, which made them especially attractive to the princess. Then Diana invited Olga to go with her to the bookstore to choose the right books and find out what girls of her circle were currently enjoying. After this, the lady and others began to suspect that Diana was looking for something specific, perhaps planning to use it to achieve her own goals. But Olga said that Diana is trying to find something worthy for herself, something that suits her status, and tastes something that would reflect her inner world and personality, and not just a random choice. For the first time, Diana found herself surrounded by such a huge number of books, which seemed to create a whole world of knowledge and stories, exciting and varied, as if inviting her to immerse herself in reading. It turned out that her life had never before intersected with so much literature, and she was not in the habit of turning to books, so this experience was new and unexpected for her. The seller, noticing the interest, decided to show them several special books that might interest Diana and prove important or useful to her at this moment in her life. The books were truly captivating, and their popularity continued to grow, judging by the reactions of visitors and the attention they received, as if they were still relevant. Diana began reading one of the books which told the story of Zelina and spoke of her reluctance to accept the jewels sent by her mistress, which created an intriguing plot. In the story, the lady noted that precious stones were probably not enough, and if the lady were given something valuable, she could seduce her dear son and now does not want to part with him. The girl in the story explained that her mother should understand her feelings because she truly loves the young man with whom she is connected with a special affection and tenderness. The woman remained indifferent, not understanding how such a seemingly simple girl could be next to such a precious and important son for her. This misunderstanding and distrust of the girl only intensified because she believed that she was not worthy of being near her dear son. When the girl confessed that she was expecting her son's child, the situation became even more tense, and Diana felt how deep and interesting this story was. Diana immediately realized that this story was unusual and worthy of attention because it concealed the internal struggle and complex feelings of the characters. She simply couldn't tear herself away from reading, immersing herself in the development of events as if she herself was experiencing all the twists and turns along with the characters. She was overcome with curiosity. She wanted to know what would happen next, how the fates of the heroes would unfold, and how all the conflicts and secrets would be resolved. She continued reading, completely oblivious to the time, and not even noticing the presence of her maid, so captivated was she by this story. She accompanied her words with comments that brought a slight smile to Olga's face, as if she found something funny or pleasant in it. Apparently, everything that was happening really evoked positive emotions in her and left a good impression. In the royal palace, the days for the princess were rather monotonous, boring, and predictable, as if everything was repeated without change or any exciting events. She spent most of her time walking and the rest of her time diligently studying, immersing herself in the study of various sciences and disciplines. After lunch, the princess usually rested with a cup of aromatic tea, allowing herself to relax a little and collect her thoughts. At such moments, Diana had to be there keeping her company and sharing her quiet hours of rest to support and brighten her leisure time. One day Diana came and announced that she had a gift for HRH Juliana, an exquisite jewel from a German duchy as well as a love story with a gripping plot and an obsessive villain. With a smile, Diana explained that she had chosen this book specifically that morning, hoping that the princess would appreciate such a choice. But Juliana herself immediately declared that she did not read such works. She made it clear that she was the princess of her country, which imposed certain obligations and restrictions on her leisure time and preferences. She simply had neither the time nor the desire to spend hours reading books of this kind, which she considered low-grade and frivolous. In her opinion, such entertainment could only appeal to frivolous aristocrats who had enough free time and no real worries. Although she appreciated Diana's generosity and thoughtfulness, the princess firmly insisted that Diana take the book back and not insist on the gift. She could have at least read the first page because this book was very interesting, and Diana knew that it was worth paying attention to, understand it better. So Diana decided to find out what exactly Julia likes to do in her free time to better understand her habits and hobbies. Julia said that she mostly reads instructional books, sometimes goes for walks, sometimes does embroidery, and also plays chess from time to time, which surprises her a little. Hearing this, Diana found this habit quite unexpected since in their circle chess was considered a matter mainly for men. Julia admitted that she expected exactly this reaction, since in their country the opinion that chess is an exclusively male game is ingrained, and this surprises many. Due to the lack of a partner to play with, she is often left to play chess alone, which of course is not much fun. Then Diana suggested that she could join Julia in a game of chess, which greatly surprised the princess and left her slightly perplexed. The princess warned in advance that she had no intention of giving the newcomer any leeway and would play as seriously and according to the rules as possible. Mrs. Diana replied that there was no need to worry and assured her that she would play with full dedication, which calmed the princess somewhat. Diana also added that she wanted to start the game herself by making the first move, which was a bold and unexpected move. It was a truly risky move that showed her confidence and determination from the very beginning of the game. After some time, Diana managed to put the princess in checkmate, which caused Julia considerable surprise and respect. The princess admitted that Diana was indeed good at chess, which left her somewhat dubious considering it luck. However, she suggested that perhaps this was just a coincidence and that this first result should not be read too highly. Diana took the praise as a simple, flattering remark and did not attach much importance to it, believing that she was simply lucky in this game. The princess, not wanting to stop, suggested playing another game, but again forgot about her defeats and continued to fight for victory. She had already lost 10 times in a row, not understanding why Diana played so well and confidently, as if she had a special talent. The princess seemed to play as if she had only just started learning that morning, but in fact Diana played much better despite her words. Diana claimed that her success was simply luck, and the princess was never able to figure out how exactly she learned to play chess with such dexterity. Life teaches by doing, and Diana noticed that the princess gave in too often, which is why she lost almost every game. So the princess insisted on another game, although the maid had already told her that she should be careful and not get too carried away. Then it became known that Lady Agnes had arrived, and this news caused a certain excitement among those present. Diana was surprised as she did not know these people, but soon Agnes herself appeared, greeted her sister, and explained why she had come. Now the princess had a new acquaintance and friend, her sister, with whom she was about to get to know each other better. Although Agnes was the king's illegitimate daughter and concubine, she still bore the royal name, which meant special love and recognition from her father. Diana bowed politely to Agnes and greeted her, but Agnes immediately rushed to her sister, wanting to spend as much time with her as possible. Agnes invited the princess to play together and asked how Julia chewed, showing concern and trying to get closer to her, although their relationship did not seem entirely warm to her. Idem thought that their connection was not very close, and perhaps she herself had made a mistake in trying to establish contact because there was clearly some coldness and misunderstanding between them. Julia turned to her and reminded her that while they were alone they could behave freely, but when other guests appeared, Diana must strictly adhere to the rules of etiquette and behave in accordance with her status. Resley properly showing respect and observing all the formalities required by the society in which they found themselves, but Diana didn't understand why it was necessary to do this and why it was important to obey these conventions. She didn't see much point in it. Julia noted that if Diana did not follow these rules, she could be reproached and condemned among the guests for such behavior, which could damage her reputation. Then Diana stood up and said that their relationship really left much to be desired. There was a lot of misunderstanding and tension between them. She admitted that their relationship was simply terrible and there was no warmth or trust between them, only coldness and alienation. Agnes found the situation dire. Being criticized for such trivial matters was an unpleasant and distressing experience for her. Someone asked why this was happening, and the maid turned to Lady Agnes, reminding her that she was no longer a little girl, but a grown woman who should behave accordingly. She had to adhere to the manners and rules of conduct that were appropriate to her age and position in society. Diana hoped that this would not upset Agnes and make her cry because she knew how difficult it was for her to cope with criticism. Agnes noted that she had always been like this and had never had any problems with following rules and manners since childhood, so such comments were a surprise to her. Diana was reassured that nothing bad would happen and noticed that Juliana's sister Agnes was too indifferent to what was happening, as if she didn't care about any problems. This created an unsettling feeling. She hoped that such indifference would prevent the princess from causing a scandal or turning everything upside down with her behavior. This was important for Diana's peace of mind and the order around her. The little girl seemed completely clueless to Diana, and she assumed that since Agnes had come to visit, she would simply leave without causing any trouble or interfering in their affairs. A naive hope that was soon dashed. Next time, Diana would not trust so easily and would not allow the situation to repeat itself, because such moments could result in trouble and damage the reputation of everyone around. As Agnes left, Diana noticed her sly grin, which indicated that the girl was pleased with the current situation and perhaps had something of her own in mind, something not entirely honest and open. After this, Diana carefully watched Juliana's reaction, trying to understand how she perceived what was happening and what she was going to do next in this confusing game. It was clear that the princess was not herself at the moment. Her look and behavior did not correspond to her usual calm and reasonableness, as if something was deeply troubling her. Apparently, Agnes occupied a higher position in their internal hierarchy than Juliana herself, and this gave her certain advantages and influence in their circle. The princess asked Diana if she was going to simply leave things as they were and do nothing about the lawlessness that was happening. She looked down on Diana as if questioning her abilities and resolve in Diana, although she understood this could not change the situation or confront the princess directly. The princess then ordered Diana to protect her interests, stating that she must use her power and influence to not show weakness in front of others and to show who is the boss. Diana had to avoid showing her weakness to the girls and not give in to provocations, otherwise it could negatively affect not only her reputation, but also the position of the princess herself. Diana's reputation was closely linked to that of the princess, so any actions or reactions Diana took could have far-reaching consequences for both, especially in such a tense environment. Diana realized the princess was genuinely tired, and she'd given her permission to skip classes today, as she herself needed to rest after a long day. This was important to Diana, and she took it seriously. Diana bowed deeply, expressing her respect and understanding for the princess's request, fully accepting her decision and willingness to support her at this moment, without insisting on her duties. As Diana was leaving the room, she thought about the princess's words, trying to understand the hidden meaning and true feelings that she had not expressed directly, but only hinted at with her behavior. She thought that the princess might have some dislike for her, but she quickly realized that this was not the case. Her impressions had deceived her, and her true attitude was completely different. The princess often spoke in riddles and hints like a child who cannot directly express her emotions, and her anger appeared only when it was convenient, hidden behind vague hints. Despite all this complexity and secrecy, Diana understood that even with such behavior, the princess could not help herself or those around her remaining in her inner closed world. After some time, the princess sat on the balcony, feeling her head splitting with pain and tension, unable to find a way to alleviate her condition, despite her attempts to distract herself. Then her gaze fell on the book that Diana had once brought, and she wondered why this particular volume was nearby at this moment, as if trying to find an answer or consolation. The princess remembered that she had forgotten her own book, and that it was Diana who had spoken of taking it, but now all this seemed unimportant in the light of her state of health. She began to leaf through the pages of that book, trying to find something interesting or useful in it that could distract her or help her cope with the pain, despite her doubts. However, the princess did not understand what could be so special about this small, seemingly simple and insignificant book, and could not explain her interest in it. The paper was translated with great difficulty, and the author's writing skills were so poor that it seemed he came from a lower class. Everything was written very clumsily, betraying a lack of education and experience. Those people weren't even close to the palace gates. Their position was far from power and influence. They were unfamiliar with court life and customs, and therefore could not aspire to more. There was not a drop of educational information in their actions, as if they did not understand what to do and how to behave in the current circumstances, desperately trying to find the right path. Every time Agnes appeared, Her Highness would develop a severe headache, as if her presence brought anxiety and inner discomfort that was difficult to ignore. After some time, the maid returned and said that she had also brought a small thing from her, which according to her could be used to alleviate the condition. She noticed that the lady was sitting and reading attentively, which seemed strange to her since this woman had never previously shown interest in books and similar activities. This surprised her because Roman and she had never been keen on reading or had shown any such interest in literature or knowledge. The maid explained that this man was a headache remedy and offered professionally crafted fragrances that were believed to alleviate the mistress's condition. However, the princess did not even pay attention to these words, as if considering them unimportant and not worthy of her attention, continuing to ignore the offered help. She did not understand what it meant to be a highness, and the impact this title could have on her life, and those around her, which reflected her inner alienation from courtly norms. At that moment, she didn't even notice how quietly the maid entered, which spoke of her complete immersion in her own thoughts and lack of interest in what was happening around her. The maid again reminded her that if her health did not improve, she would bring her a small rosary which, according to belief, could help cope with the disease. Juliana replied that at first she thought it was more serious, but now she realized that she was fine and there was no need to worry, although she remained wary and attentive to her condition. The maid inquired if her mistress was truly all right, as she had insisted on leaving the tea and not being disturbed any further. She was surprised by this unusual behavior from her mistress, who was usually attentive to details. The maid was even more surprised as she saw how her mistress was reading the book with great interest, completely immersed in the plot, which seemed uncharacteristic for her at that moment. The lady did not pay any attention to the tea that was left nearby, and did not even look in its direction, as if she had completely forgotten about it or did not need rest. The maid noticed that she had left the tea a little carelessly and was afraid that the hot cup might accidentally tip over and burn her mistress, so she became slightly nervous. But contrary to her fears, the lady simply took the cookies from the table, paying no more attention to the tea, and calmly continued to go about her business. She ate the cookie without taking her eyes off the book, as if completely lost in its pages and oblivious to the world around her, including the presence of the maid. As time went on, Juliana grew increasingly tired while reading the book, and the tension gradually subsided, but the fatigue became noticeable even in her gaze and posture. The next day, Diana returned to the palace as usual to perform her duties and be close to the princess, who was gradually beginning to trust her more. The knight had already become accustomed to her visits to the palace, and these trips became a familiar ritual for her, which noticeably improved her mood and attitude towards work. Her relationship with the princess gradually improved, and at one point Juliana unexpectedly asked to bring her the next volume of the book, which was a sign of trust and interest. However, not everything in their relationship lasted long and was stable. Some things changed quickly, and a temporary improvement could soon give way to something else. The maid warned that Diana would have to return home that day, and this decision was inevitable, although it seemed a little unexpected. The princess gave orders that no one was to be allowed into her home, leaving the doors closed and security in place, which indicated her desire to be alone and maintain personal space. Eventually, a complex situation arose that made everyone tense and wary. This was immediately apparent, although the reasons weren't immediately clear. Diana became curious about what exactly had happened and asked the maid. She replied that they were currently facing serious problems that required immediate attention and resolution. His Highness the King decided to transfer Agnes to the palace in order to be closer to her and control the situation personally, which caused unrest and gossip among the courtiers. In the end, everything developed in such a way that even the princess did not let her maid go for a minute, so today Diana received permission to leave, albeit with some reservations. Diana said that she still wanted to visit the princess despite the warnings of the maid who tried to somehow restrain her and prevent this visit. Diana assured that there was no point in worrying that everything would work out well, and that her visit could at least provide some support to the princess during this difficult moment. After this, Diana entered the room, which seemed unusually dark and gloomy, as if not a single ray of light penetrated there, despite the fact that it was daytime. She heard that the princess had spent several days there in a row, and she wondered why the room was so dark, as if someone deliberately did not want to let in the light. Given the princess's character, it was clear that she could not open up to anyone, preferring to withdraw into herself and go into long thoughts as if in a cocoon. Perhaps she is now crying alone because despite her age, she behaves very withdrawn and vulnerable, as if trying to hide her true feelings. Although she is still very young, the princess behaves like an old woman, losing her childish spontaneity and plunging into difficult experiences and pain. Suddenly, she noticed a small lump of cotton wool and immediately noticed that the princess was standing nearby, looking very tense and wary at that moment. The princess said that it was she who came here, and her voice sounded restrained, as if trying to hide her true feelings and intentions. Her behavior seemed strange and unusual. The princess seemed to be hiding something, and there was a sense of uncertainty and anxiety in her movements. When she looked closely at the princess, she noticed that she was holding scissors in her hands, which further increased her suspicions about her intentions. The princess was startled when she saw Diana, and her face immediately changed, reflecting the fear and inner turmoil she was trying to hide. Diana asked what exactly the princess was doing, but she only reminded him that she had asked not to let anyone into the room, while clearly showing anxiety. The princess quickly covered the cut teddy bear with cloth and insisted that Diana leave, trying to maintain control of the situation and hide her actions. It seemed that such a graceful and majestic princess was now busy with something completely different from her usual affairs, which surprised everyone around. She stood up and repeated that she had categorically asked that no one be allowed into the room, emphasizing her dissatisfaction and the strictness of the demands. However, her request was ignored, and this caused her noticeable irritation and a feeling of resentment. The princess's inner state could be described as deep annoyance. She clearly did not expect such disobedience. She didn't even notice that there was a small piece of cotton wool sticking out of her hair, which made her look even more careless and touching. Diana admitted that it all happened by chance, and the princess, softening, invited her to play a game of chess, showing her character and opening up to a different side. Diana did not expect that the princess had such a strong and complex character, which was combined with a certain softness and kindness. It turned out that she wasn't as bad as she initially seemed, and this discovery changed the way she was treated. In the Heberunya Empire in the Arch Duchy of Haman, the servants were at a loss and did not know what to do with their master in this difficult situation. They asked what had happened, and at that moment, Kier suddenly began to cough, which only added to the anxiety and worry of everyone present. They were told that fortunately this was just a small achievement, not to worry too much about it, and that they could calmly move on without dwelling on what had happened. Kier insisted not to panic, because in reality he had simply fallen and nothing serious had happened, and there was no need to exaggerate the situation. She spent a long time saying that Kier was taking on too much, and that he needed to put less pressure on himself, otherwise it could negatively affect his health and strength. Kirill said that he didn't care about these warnings, but the servant intervened, noting that everyone was worried about him, and therefore advised him to give himself a break today. But Kirill replied that he did not agree with such a proposal, because a real vacation was still a long way off. There were too many things to do and responsibilities. Compared to him, she was a true saint. During military operations, she often cried at night from fatigue and worry. No one consoled her. Then, despite all their efforts, sometimes she hid from prying eyes to cry alone, not wanting to show weakness. When her hands became covered with wounds and scars from battles, it became proof of her devotion and fortitude, the true spirit of a knight. It was after these trials that she became a true knight, earning respect and honor, not only through words but also through deeds. Therefore, it is believed that Kirill has no right to rest because responsibility and business do not wait, and time demands full dedication. He must not waste a minute and use every opportunity to move forward without allowing himself weakness or delay. He turned to Walter and told him that to achieve his goal, he must become a knight. This was his first step toward the one who meant most to him. He was willing to go through anything for it. This path was difficult, but he wasn't going to back down under any circumstances. He knew this first step was crucial, and he intended to see it through to the end to earn her respect and trust. He trained diligently, pouring his whole heart and soul into his studies. No difficulties could stop him. He strove for perfection to be worthy of what lay ahead. Meanwhile, Diana strolled with the princess, enjoying the quiet moments and the peace around them. They discussed future plans, unaware that everything would soon change due to upcoming events. Several years later, a maid rushed to Diana with important news. She looked excited and couldn't wait to share what she had just heard. The maid asked if Diana had heard the latest news, and her question was full of impatience because it could affect the future life and fate of the entire family. Diana asked what news exactly they were talking about, and the maid told her that delegations from the Heberunya Empire would soon arrive, which was a very significant event and could change a lot. Realizing that the time had come to act, Diana ordered Olga to prepare the carriage as she was planning to go to the palace to personally greet the arriving guests and take her rightful place. They informed us that the delegations had already arrived and time was limited. Everything was happening quickly, and we needed to be prepared for anything that might happen in the coming hours. Diana was very grateful to Barrow for the help he provided her. His support was essential, and she appreciated his dedication and the effort he put into the cause. Everyone around her thought Diana looked dazzling, as if she shone with her inner strength and beauty. Her confidence and determination inspired those around her. She asked Barrow how things had been lately, wondering if there had been any progress or changes that might affect their plans. Before Barrow an obstacle that halted his growth and efforts toward his goal, he realized that new challenges lay ahead. He assured that there was no need to worry, that he would definitely overcome this wall, because only in this way could he become stronger and better protect the one for whom all this was started. He should have done this primarily for himself, not for her. If he had remained in the palace, he would have already held a high position, but he chose a different path, recognizing his personal responsibility. Diana expressed hope that he would be able to overcome all the difficulties. Her words were more of an encouragement in case he decided to accept her help. He was genuinely grateful to Diana, especially considering that the empire had made a decisive move in politics that would affect everyone around it. This meant that war would soon begin, and it could no longer be avoided. Tensions were mounting and preparations were becoming inevitable. Juliana approached Diana with an important question, hoping to get her attention and share something personal. However, Diana did not answer right away. Her thoughts were occupied with internal reflections, and she almost did not hear the words of her interlocutor. Juliana announced that she had started dating someone, wanting to share the news, even though she didn't fully understand her feelings yet. Her mind was so immersed in these experiences that she seemed detached, as if immersed in her own thoughts. Diana was surprised and asked why she was asking such an unexpected question, trying to understand the princess's true motives. Juliana pointed in the direction where she thought the young man was clearly showing interest in her, which brought a slight smile to both of them. Diana advised the princess not to joke like that because the mere sight of this young man evoked too strong emotions in her. The princess explained that this had been going on for a very long time, as if he was stalking her, because he was the son of Viscount Badley, and that explained a lot. The young man's family was extremely wealthy, and had recently received a title, and he spent a considerable amount of money to attend Juliana's party. Diana said she didn't particularly want to know, and doubted he'd actually looked at her. Her mind was elsewhere, and she didn't want to delve into the details. However, she soon noticed how he winked at her, and this moment made her feel a little surprised, although she diligently tried not to pay attention to it. The princess was absolutely certain the wink was meant for her. Afterward, she told Sveta she wouldn't look in his direction again and would try to forget the incident. Everyone had already heard that a delegation from the Empire was expected to arrive soon. The news was discussed on every corner, and no one doubted that this event would be important for the kingdom. There were rumors that representatives of the Empire wanted to form an alliance with their kingdom, and this promised serious changes in the political situation in the region. This is a marriage that is meant to create a strong and lasting bond between the two royal families, ensuring peace and mutual assistance for many years to come. She was the only princess in the country, and this made her the prime candidate for such an important role in this union, regardless of her wishes and plans for the future. Despite all her objections, the choice still fell on her, and she understood that it would be very difficult, if not impossible, to avoid this fate. Diana didn't understand why she was raising the issue now, but the princess was already tired of the conversations and wanted to get a divorce as soon as possible, so as not to waste time on empty discussions. The delegation was going to come specifically to discuss this marriage union between the countries, and the conversations continued, despite the reluctance of some to listen. The guy was still talking, not noticing that Diana was about to interrupt him and make him shut up so as not to listen to this empty talk anymore. The Empire already has one princess, and the Crown Prince has long been betrothed to her. This is a well-known fact accepted by everyone as an established order and a guarantee of stability in the state. No one understands why they want to take a new wife for the prince. They see it as an insult to the entire country, since the Empire has plenty of princesses, and interfering with that system is considered unacceptable. Everyone is convinced that such a union cannot be allowed. The question arises, why enter into such a marriage at all if it contradicts traditions and the interests of the state? It seems utterly pointless. The Empire is considered a backward and savage state. The princess even ordered the discussions to cease, but then a particular persistence emerged that shocked everyone. Every empire has its own strict laws and regulations that no one can ignore. These rules must be followed, otherwise everything will fall apart, and no one understands why anyone would try to break them. Whatever the Crown Prince's decision, everyone must respect it. She, as a representative of her side, is ready to make any sacrifice for the good of the country and the preservation of peace. The princess is willing to do anything for the good of the state. They are preparing to embark on a journey to conclude an important agreement, hoping it will bring long-awaited peace and prosperity. The man, realizing the gravity of the situation, immediately apologized. He acknowledged their rude behavior and promised to watch his words in the future to avoid similar misunderstandings. Katya appeared calm and collected, though inside she was likely seething with strong emotions and resentment. She tried not to show it outwardly so as not to undermine the situation. Kirill was delighted to be back in these lands. He'd been looking forward to it for a long time, and every time he came here, he felt a special connection and joy, as if he were returning home. Each visit to these lands left a profound impression on him. He carefully observed everything around him, absorbing the atmosphere and beauty that could not leave even the most stern person indifferent. These lands were exceptionally fertile. Nature was generous here, and despite all the difficulties, the land yielded abundant harvests, making it a true treasure for the inhabitants. This land was very different from the holdings of their empire, and the locals seemed completely different. Everything around them was unfamiliar and different from what the inhabitants of their homelands were accustomed to. Because of this, many tried to seize at least part of this territory for themselves, because here one could find wealth and power which they wanted to possess as quickly as possible. They soon planned to rest at the next portal to recuperate and prepare for new adventures, which promised to be no less challenging. Kirill thought about Diana all the time, because he was sure that she would soon be his, and this thought filled his heart with a special thrill and anticipation. Diana was very grateful to everyone for coming to her party because it was a special moment that she wanted to share with all the people important to her. They really had fun, and everyone felt grateful for such a meeting. The evening passed in a warm and friendly atmosphere which warmed the hearts of those present. The lady wished them to take care of themselves on the journey and to set off in a good mood, saying a few warm words of advice before their journey. After these words, she sighed easily, sat down on the sofa, and allowed herself to relax a little, enjoying the peace and quiet. She asked where Diana was now, and was told that she had gone into the yard to deliver gifts because she did not want to delay the guests and wanted to help. Juliana was surprised to see Diana in her room because she did not expect her to appear here at such a moment. Upon closer inspection, Juliana noticed that Diana looked strange. Something in her behavior and appearance revealed inner experiences and thoughtfulness. This piqued Juliana's interest. She wondered what Diana could be thinking about so intensely and what could be bothering her. She came closer to Diana, trying to understand what was happening, but she could not grasp the reason for such silence and thoughtfulness. Then Juliana asked why Diana was silent, and what was keeping her thoughts silent, waiting to hear the answer to her questions. After that, Diana grabbed her hand tightly, as if trying to hold the entire world in her fingers. The movement was unexpected but decisive. She had no intention of letting go. The princess felt intense fear and confusion, unable to comprehend what was happening around her. Her thoughts were jumbled, and she couldn't comprehend the situation, as if everything that was happening were a dream. Everything seemed perfect and frightening at the same time when the princess noticed her finger catch on something hard, as if clinging to a reality she couldn't understand. The princess remained confused, unable to comprehend what had happened. She didn't understand what exactly had happened or why she now found herself in this situation. Diana, without wasting any time, asked the lady why she was lying on the floor, trying to understand the reason for such behavior and trying to help. The lady replied that she felt a coldness that seemed to fall from above, and because of this, she suddenly felt weak and simply fell to the floor. The princess was indignant, saying that it was enough to justify herself, since it was Diana herself who had laid her where she was now lying. She was perplexed and could not understand how Diana could decide to do such a thing and why she even looked at her with such a look. Diana immediately helped the princess up, and she noticed that she looked as if she had gone crazy from worry or stress. The princess thought Diana hoped her actions would go unnoticed, but she quickly began to apologize, showing genuine regret. These were Diana's old habits. She did not want to offend or hurt anyone, but sometimes old manners got the better of her will. The princess remarked that she wanted to hear from Diana what she was thinking about, because this moment was important for understanding her inner state. Because she needed to know why Diana had decided on such an unexpected and abrupt move just a minute ago. The princess noticed Diana's silence and assumed she feared punishment for disobeying orders or for supposedly forbidding harm to a member of the royal family. This silence seemed like an admission of guilt. Diana replied that this wasn't true and admitted she didn't know how to explain the situation. She was struggling to find the words to tell the truth, and she was trying to avoid misunderstandings. The princess marveled at Diana's resilience as she remained calm and composed despite the tense situation. Such behavior spoke of a strong character and inner resolve. Just before entering Heberunia, where no stranger had ever set foot, Juliana was to die on the way. This death was to become the catalyst for further events and increased tensions between the states. Following the princess's death, relations between the two kingdoms became increasingly strained, edging ever closer to war. The hostility intensified to the point where diplomacy could hardly resolve it. In reality, Juliana dreamed of escaping to a neighboring state before the situation spiraled out of control and escalated into a bloody conflict. This plan was her secret hope for salvation. However, circumstances changed, and the plans she had made suddenly had to be adjusted due to new threats and dangers that arose around her. Because of these changes, she avoided any contact with the princess at all costs, wanting to stay out of trouble and maintain her safety by not getting involved in a complicated relationship. The princess, not understanding the reason for Diana's silence, assumed that she simply wanted to try the prisoner's food, perhaps as a distraction or as a form of hidden sarcasm. One person cannot stop the impending war, and Diana especially did not want to become the one who is doomed and responsible for all the tragedies that could happen. She asked the princess to be patient and wait, as it was difficult for her to talk about this topic now, and she needed time to collect her thoughts and explain everything correctly. She said that as soon as she received answers to her questions, she would definitely tell me everything. This was her promise, which she made with complete seriousness and the intention to keep. The princess disagreed with this approach. She couldn't understand how Diana could blurt it all out so easily, as if it were a trifle not worthy of serious consideration. Diana immediately began explaining that she had problems that required an immediate solution. She had just received important news that would change the entire situation. She urgently needed to leave, but the princess stopped her, asking who had given her permission to leave her presence at such a moment. Diana thought to herself that she was facing a truly difficult and complex opponent who would not let her get away easily and would not allow herself to be deceived. Almost by force, Diana got out of the room, feeling that it took a lot of effort to break free from these tenacious shackles. To sound convincing and gain time, she had to use all her oratory skills and ability to speak in a way that would make people believe in her. But the meaning of all this remained unclear to her. She didn't know what to do or how to proceed in this situation. There was no clarity about the plan of action, and escaping from the princess and the entire country was most likely not going to work. It seemed almost impossible. After all, the entire country would have been razed to its feet, and the persecution would not have stopped, even if it had been possible to hide for some time. The war can no longer be stopped. Conflicts are inevitable, and sooner or later, everyone will start to clash again, leading to new battles and losses. The knight noticed that his mistress was lost in thought and inquired about what was occupying her thoughts at that moment. He wanted to understand what had caused her to feel this way, as if something important were troubling her heart. The lady replied that she indeed had serious reasons to reflect and that not everything was as simple as it seemed at first glance. She felt that now was the time for deep inner reflection. The knight admitted that he sometimes doubted his own abilities and considered himself insufficiently worthy to provide his mistress with the necessary support or assistance in her affairs. He lacked self-confidence. However, he added that if she shared her worries with him, their burden would be twice as light, and if she spoke of her joys, their happiness would multiply 100-fold. He believed that together they would cope more easily. He assured her that he was always ready to listen to his mistress and support her at any moment, so she should not forget that he was always there and ready to help if needed. The lady expressed gratitude for such words, but the knight modestly replied that there was no need to thank her at all. For him, it was natural, and he was glad to be of service to her in any situation. Regina, who was also ready to support her mistress and listen to all her worries, showed sincere concern and attention to her condition, discreetly observed their conversation. The knight asked again what exactly was troubling Diana, why she was so tense, and what was tormenting her, because on the outside she looked calm, but deep down something was clearly bothering her. Diana admitted that sometimes you need to be able to stop and rest to find time for a break, otherwise internal tension begins to destroy your strength and interfere with concentration. She also wanted the knight to be able to overcome all the difficulties that stood before him, like a high wall, and jump over it, because there was a war ahead and he needed to be ready. In addition, she noted that if there were not such a worthy knight nearby, he would have long ago been promoted to a higher position for his merits and abilities, but for now, he remains in the same place. The knight admitted that he didn't know how to enjoy tea at all and thought he was bad at it, but Diana said that everything was fine and he could drink it the way he liked without trying to be perfect. She herself was not perfect in this matter and understood that everything comes with experience, so one should not judge oneself too harshly and strive for an unattainable ideal. At first, she didn't succeed either, and only over time did she become more experienced and skillful, learn to enjoy simple things and not be afraid to make mistakes. Just a couple of years ago, Diana Resley didn't even know how to say hello properly, but thanks to her hard work and a good teacher, she managed to master all the subtleties of etiquette and manners, becoming an almost perfect lady. Every day she rose early, put on her shoes, and diligently practiced her graceful bow and greeting until her movements became flawlessly graceful and confident. Even her personal knight was amazed at the persistence with which she trained daily, because he could not imagine that a lady was engaged in such things. From the very first day they met, she seemed like the epitome of perfection, but the girl reminded everyone that everything happens for the first time, and that's normal. Likewise, Baru will eventually overcome his awkwardness because everything comes with experience and no one is born perfect. Everyone takes things step by step. So she decided to gently nudge him towards the right conclusion and reminded him of the words her etiquette teacher had once said to her during one of her classes. Ladies, as Baroness Willems said, should resemble both flowers and jewels, be just as graceful and beautiful. Barrow admitted that the comparison sounded very poetic, and Diana added that these things were created to be looked at with admiration, or they serve as decoration for someone emphasizing his status, elegance, and value in society, or they exist only to be admired. This is their essence, their main purpose. But Diana herself did not want to become exactly this kind of lady. She strove for a different image, a different understanding of femininity and her own path. So Diana chose a path she would walk independently without relying on anyone's will. Her decision was conscious, driven not by fear, but by inner freedom. Her past life seemed unbearably hard to her. She recalled that time with disgust, like chains that constrained her every movement and prevented her from breathing. In that life she obeyed mindlessly, doing everything she was ordered to do, as if she had neither the desire nor the right to her own will. That previous life had been devoid of her as an individual. She didn't even make choices for herself. Everything was determined by others, and she simply followed a predetermined course. She was like a pawn in someone else's game, politely moved across a field where destinies were decided by others, and there was no opportunity to turn back or say no. That's why she didn't want Barrow to fall into the same trap. She didn't want him to go through the same path she had to endure. She understood that once he grasped the essence, everything holding him back would crumble. Then his doubts would disappear, and a new path would open up for him. And she quietly asked him if he realized this. He admitted that he was beginning to understand something, but he still found it difficult to grasp the essence, as if a fog was preventing him from seeing what was being discussed. She noted that by telling him her story, she not only pointed out her past, but gave him the opportunity to see his own path, the one that awaits him. Diana added that if you compare their destinies, you'll notice similar twists and turns. He'll soon realize this himself, and then the choice will become obvious. Olga was genuinely surprised. Could this really be the man the mistress had chosen? He, the one who spent his days lazily reading novels and living in a carefree mood? But Diana abruptly interrupted her thoughts and ordered her to remain silent, not allowing even a shadow of condemnation. Her choice was final. Regina entered Diana's chambers without knocking, breaking the usual silence that reigned in the room. She looked preoccupied, and her gaze was full of determination, as if something important had been left behind the door. Without further ado, Regina announced that her father had ordered Diana to be summoned. The words were stern with a hint of command, leaving no room for discussion. Diana frowned slightly, not expecting such an invitation. She closed the book she had been reading and carefully placed it on the table, pondering the reason for this summons. Not wanting to drag things out, she left the room and headed down the corridor toward the chambers where the head of the family was. Her thoughts were chaotic and wary. On the way, Regina stopped her. Suddenly, she grabbed her wrist as if trying to explain something or keep her from taking further steps. Diana was confused, unable to comprehend what was happening to her friend. Regina was acting strangely, and there was tension in her voice as if it concealed a reproach. Regina insistently asked to be heard. It sounded more like a demand than a request, and Diana had no choice but to freeze in place. Then she abruptly asked what Diana's relationship was with her personal knight. Diana was stunned. She couldn't understand where this wild fantasy had come from. She calmly explained that between them there was only the official status of lady and knight and nothing more. Her voice betrayed the weariness of empty accusations. She tried to answer as clearly as possible, but Regina seemed not to hear. She hesitated and looked as if she didn't believe her own suspicions. Diana added that she wasn't aware of other people's speculations, but she didn't want to be drawn into such scenes. She made it clear that this wasn't her game. In conclusion, she coldly said that she was tired of discussing this and that Regina should not allow herself to ask such questions in the future. It affected her honor. Regina, taken aback by such abruptness, asked again, as if hoping that she had misheard or misunderstood the meaning of what was said. After that, she stood right in front of Diana, her eyes sparkling, and she declared that she was the one who felt insulted because Diana was again blaming everything on her. She was both a friend of Princess Juliana and the Lady of the Night Baru, who had guarded her since her rebirth when she vowed never to take up arms again or return to her former life. Regina couldn't understand why everyone around her was only talking about Diana, why the attention, honor, and even rumors seemed to revolve exclusively around her. She was tormented by a feeling of injustice. She did not understand why Diana had received everything, although she had done nothing special and had not sought either power or love. One day, Diana suddenly asked if Regina wanted to know the truth, hinting that there was more to her name than just the favor of the royal family. It all started with Regina feeling that even her own desires seemed not to belong to her, and everything around her was slowly but inexorably moving towards Diana. Then Regina realized everything. She realized this wasn't her story and it wasn't her place, but she still said that Diana didn't deserve it either. Despite everything deep down, she felt that Diana shouldn't have had all this either, and that the world was unfairly pushing them both into roles that weren't theirs. There was a strange feeling that everything had gone wrong from the moment Diana had given up the sword, as if giving up her power had upset the order of things. Although Regina herself didn't care who she was, a lady or a knight, she always believed that what was more important was not the title, but how a person behaved and what he really wanted. However, the conviction still grew within her that Diana was to blame for everything, and even her silence, her choices, and her indifference seemed to hurt her the most. Diana sternly ordered him to step back as she needed to move on immediately without wasting a second. Her voice was resolute, brooking no argument as if any delay would be too costly. Regina, sensing the gravity of the moment, silently stepped aside, allowing Diana to pass. She realized it was best not to interfere, as what was happening clearly went beyond the scope of a routine visit. Perhaps Diana really is doing the right thing. Sometimes it's hard to understand someone's actions at first glance, but over time it becomes clear that they were dictated by necessity. Everything went wrong, and Diana herself was the cause. Her actions, unpredictable and bold, set off a chain of events that altered the course of a fate she had already known. She never considered the reasons for her return to the past. Why was she the one given the chance to start over? Was she really that important to something greater? She was plagued by doubts. If she told someone the truth, would anyone believe her? Or would they think she was crazy? This question had haunted her since she woke up in a new world. She didn't have time to really think about it because suddenly she received a message. Someone was asking for her hand in marriage. Surprise turned to anxiety because she didn't know who exactly had proposed. She tried to understand why this question had arisen now, and unable to resist, she asked who this man was. She hadn't expected the answer, and it truly stunned her. Father merely shrugged and said there was nothing surprising about it. Princess Juliana was about to be married, and now that the puppet role had been played, it was time for her to find a groom. Diana, to her own surprise, found herself attracted to this family. It was Viscount Badley, a man with a strange gaze who had studied her too closely at their first meeting. She hadn't paid it any mind at the time, but now she realized it was he who had been staring at her so persistently. His interest was too obvious, and now everything fell into place. In the morning, the butler rushed in with news, as always haltingly and without knocking. He addressed his mistress, breaking the silence of the room where Diana was just beginning to collect her thoughts. He asked if Lilia was okay, the one clutching her head and turning pale. Something bad must have happened, since even she couldn't contain her emotions. Diana realized in that instant, everything she'd tried to build had collapsed. It was a complete and utter failure. And now she had to urgently decide how to get out of this situation. Diana lay in bed, feeling sleep slowly, ebbing. Her eyelids fluttered, and she weakly opened them, letting the morning light flood the room. She woke abruptly, as if from a deep, troubled sleep. The maid entered quietly, placed a tray of food down, and noticed that her mistress looked very depressed. Apparently, she had been severely shocked. Everyone assumed she had fainted from the stress. Olga, watching her, wasn't the least bit surprised. Marriage is a serious matter, and not everyone can handle such news, especially when it comes to alliances between noble houses. However, Diana admitted that her excitement was not at all due to the upcoming marriage, but because of the identity of the groom himself, whose name came as a shock to her. She never would have imagined that something like this could evoke such a storm of emotions. Learning who her husband would be was such a shock that her body couldn't bear it. In this weakness, she found a certain comforting care. She liked the way Olga brought food, how she looked after her as if she were a child who was ill, and yet something inside her seemed to have changed. Now she felt different, as if she had crossed some line, becoming part of the true people of this world. Suddenly, shouts were heard from the corridor, and the servant, not hiding his excitement, ran past, attracting the attention of everyone who was nearby. He quickly reported that the princess was looking for Diana, and urgently. The message was simple, but it conveyed both concern and importance. Kier felt sincere gratitude for such a warm and respectful welcome. He was greeted with due respect, and he felt welcomed within these walls as if he were part of this country. He arrived as the official ambassador of the great Hebirun Empire, which gave his visit special significance. The man reminded them of their allied obligations, which required them to greet the empire's representatives with due honor and ceremony. He was informed that there would be a banquet in his honor that evening, but before that he was free and could devote his time to rest or personal matters without limiting himself in his actions. Everyone was pleased with how the young gentleman handled his responsibilities. He never betrayed the trust placed in him, and his discipline and determination bore clear fruit. When he volunteered to lead the delegation, he was overcome with excitement. He was well aware of the responsibility and high expectations that rested on his shoulders. There were concerns, but the negotiations proceeded smoothly. No one thought he'd last long in the job, but when he took up the sword for the first time, he proved them wrong and proved himself worthy. Then he turned to his servant Walter, indicating that it was time to go to the private quarters to get some rest before the evening's official events. Now he was no longer just a young man with a dream, but a true knight who had justified the trust of the duchy and honorably carried the title he had been awarded. I was curious to hear about the negotiations, but he simply waved it off. According to him, there wasn't much to discuss. Everything went smoothly without complications or hitches. Everything went just as smoothly as before. The negotiations concluded successfully, and the parties quickly found common ground and reached a mutual understanding. The servant still could not believe what had happened, as if the dream had become prophetic, foreshadowing events that had now become reality, although it was difficult to comprehend. The gentleman was shocked and surprised that only now could he comprehend what was happening. The servant remarked on how difficult it had been to immediately verify the events, since it concerned the very lady he had often spoken of. The lady was truly extraordinarily beautiful. Her flaming red hair resembled a living fire, and her skin glowed in the sun's rays as if nature itself cared for her splendor. He asked where this mysterious woman was now and what she was doing, but Kier replied that he himself did not know, and this mystery further increased his interest. The servant noted that he knew nothing about her whereabouts, and then cautiously asked why the master had not tried to find out more about it until now, because it seemed strange. After all, he didn't even try to find out details about her, and if he had been interested, he could have drawn unnecessary attention to her, which could have led to trouble. Kier himself understood that it would be better for her if he did not interfere and did not show excessive interest so as not to harm her peace of mind. The servant was slightly surprised by such reasoning and attentive attitude because not everyone is capable of such care and endurance in such situations, and even Kier himself did not learn to be so attentive and caring right away. This was a new side of his character which he now diligently developed. The servant asked why his master hadn't shown concern, even though he knew perfectly well how important and difficult it was. He couldn't understand how anyone could remain indifferent to such a matter, especially when their soul was suffering. In response, Kirill ordered the servant to be silent, noting that he was surprised each time by a new side of his master, one that manifested itself in unexpected words and actions, causing bewilderment and even anxiety. In addition, the gentleman noted that he probably felt some kind of divine force around him, emanating from the kingdom of Adele, like an invisible but tangible power, influencing everything that happens. The servant tried to understand what exactly was meant by this divine power, the very one that lives in people, and sometimes manifests itself in unexpected forms, causing respect and fear at the same time. It seemed to be connected to the bright aura that the gentleman had possessed since early childhood, as if this light accompanied him everywhere and was an integral part of his being. However, the lady's power was slightly different. Her origins were different, more mysterious and complex, and in the distance, according to rumors, there was also a person possessing similar divine power. In the conversation, they decided not to delve into boring and complex topics, but rather to focus on the story of the lady herself, a woman whose strength was obvious and undeniable, arousing admiration in everyone who saw her. No one who met her could compare with her in strength. The master had never yet met a person whose spirit and power surpassed hers, which spoke of her exceptional position. The whole world seemed to freeze and fix its gaze on the lady at the moment when she swung her sword. Her every step, every movement was filled with grace and confidence that was impossible to miss. She was both strong and beautiful, possessing a rare combination of power and grace that made her truly captivating and attractive to those around her. After these words, the man pointed his finger to the side and asked if she was really there in that very territory that was being discussed, wanting to confirm his suspicions. When Kirill looked in that direction, he could not hide his fear. What he saw exceeded all his expectations and caused him anxiety that he could not completely control. Indeed, there were very beautiful ladies with fiery red hair whose beauty and strength seemed to frighten and attract at the same time, leaving a deep impression on every witness. The servant noticed that the people she described were entirely consistent with what Kirill had described. He noted that their behavior and manners were entirely consistent with how her acquaintance from the duchy had imagined them. Kirill warned the servant to be quiet and to behave modestly. The servant noticed that her clothes were very distinctive and completely unlike the typical knightly uniform he was accustomed to seeing in this place. He couldn't understand why she was here when, according to the schedule, she should have been at the training grounds where training for knights and warriors usually took place. The servant wondered what kind of unusual clothing she was wearing. He noticed that the gentlemen around her had raised their voices, and the girl herself looked as if she had arrived from the distant empire of Heberunia. Mrs. Diana was delighted to have the opportunity to meet him. She introduced herself as the Vicomte's second daughter, Resley, who owned the land, and said that her name was Diana, which immediately earned the respect of those around her. Despite the greeting, no one present understood what she was doing there, why she had suddenly appeared in a place where it seemed she did not belong. It was important to ask this question as casually as possible, so as not to disrupt the atmosphere or create tension among those gathered who were still looking at the stranger with distrust. Diana herself wanted to know why she was here and asked about it, trying to understand what was happening and where it would all lead. The servant tried to find the words to explain the situation to the young master, to make him come to his senses and understand what was happening so that he would not lose control of himself. He tried not to ask this question directly, fearing that a harsh approach would only aggravate the situation and cause unnecessary irritation in the young master. At that moment, she realized that it was Kirill, whom she had known before, who stood in front of her. But now he looked completely different than in her memories. His changes were so noticeable that at first she couldn't even recognize him right away. He was so different in appearance and behavior. Now he was completely different from how she remembered Kirill from her past life. Now he looked different with new features and character. Perhaps it was at this age that he had been like this, different, more mature and changed, and this explained all the changes in him that she now observed. Her heart suddenly started beating faster, making her feel irritated and angry because she couldn't cope with this unexpected excitement that prevented her from staying calm and in control of herself. He explained that what he really meant was that he was simply interested in knowing what people do in this place and how they spend their time there, and not anything more personal. She was very irritated by how hard and loudly her heart was beating, as if it was not listening to her, and was betraying all the inner uncertainty despite all her attempts to control her emotions. She understood that there was no point in standing here and talking to a man who had hurt her and even killed her in a past life, but for some reason, she still remained not wanting to leave. She wondered how exactly she should answer the question of what she was doing here, because an honest answer could raise too many questions and misunderstandings. He suddenly blushed with embarrassment and was completely at a loss, unable to find the words to adequately answer her simple but important question. His servant quietly asked the young master to calm down and try not to be nervous, reminding him of the need to maintain dignity and calm. The young gentleman immediately apologized for his awkwardness and admitted that he had forgotten to introduce himself, although this needed to be done immediately to avoid misunderstandings. He introduced himself as Kirill and said that he had arrived as part of a delegation from Heberunia, trying to explain his position and the purpose of his stay there. He was visibly embarrassed as he tried to explain his rude words, but in reality, he was only momentarily confused and did not want to offend anyone or put anyone in an awkward position. She couldn't understand why he seemed so confused, since there seemed to be nothing particularly difficult or unusual about the situation for him. In fact, she was the most confused, not understanding what exactly he was doing here and why he even decided to show up in this place where no one was expecting him. He seemed so passive and showed no initiative at this moment that it was unclear why his behavior raised so many questions and bewilderment. Suddenly, someone called the lady's name and her attention instantly shifted. It was an unexpected voice that made her turn around and realize that something in her life was about to change. A maid approached, managed to find her and convey the news. The princess was waiting for her lady. This message was important, signifying that a meeting was about to begin that could change many things. The lady, feeling a wave of joy and anticipation, realized it was time to leave. She had enjoyed meeting everyone around her, but now another moment was approaching. She was about to meet the princess. His response was polite and warm, and he was also pleased to meet her. The servant, observing the conversation, realized that the master was saying that the lady was a knight, but outwardly she appeared to be a simple woman of no particular status. The gentleman claimed that he remembered everything correctly, that she really was a knight, but together they tried to understand what exactly had happened, why now she did not look like a knight. He couldn't understand how he would be able to see her again now. The situation was confusing, and the answer to this question remained a mystery to him. The servant noted that the gentleman had acted wisely in not trying to find out details from a simple lady, because this could have drawn unnecessary attention and complicated the situation. Kirill had many enemies, and if the lady were in danger, he would never forgive himself. This awareness made him especially cautious and wary. This situation was unacceptable. Not the slightest threat to her safety could be allowed, because too much was at stake. She had to remain safe and belong only to him, and her gaze and attention had to be focused exclusively on him, which meant complete trust and protection. Her voice was meant to be heard only by him, so thought the gentleman, certain he knew what would happen to him in the future. He was convinced that it was this voice that would determine his fate and all the events that would occur thereafter. Walter wanted to understand what his master would become like in years to come. Perhaps he would surpass everyone and become the finest knight on the continent, renowned and powerful, whose name would be known and feared throughout the land. However, Kirill replied that he knew nothing about his master's future. He had merely observed what was happening, but his knowledge was limited, and the future seemed shrouded in mystery and uncertainty. Everything he saw and understood came solely from her perspective. He observed events through the prism of her perception, unable to assess the situation from other perspectives or understand the motives and intentions of others. After this, the servant inquired about his master's future. He himself began to ponder his own future, the path he would have to travel, and the trials he would have to overcome. He felt afraid because it was this man he had lost touch with when he killed her. This event forever changed the course of their destinies, destroyed their former ties, and forced them to consider what would happen next. Judging by the frantic expression on his face, one could imagine what he was like. His looks and demeanor betrayed an inner struggle and anxiety hidden behind a mask of calm and strength. Perhaps he would have lived differently if he hadn't let go of her dead body. This attachment haunted him, paralyzed his thoughts, and prevented him from moving forward, as if he were stuck in the past, unable to let go of what had happened. But the princess couldn't even imagine being married to a 60-year-old man. It was simply unimaginable and horrific, and she couldn't understand why such a fate had befallen her. She didn't know that such fates were commonplace for all princesses, that they were taught to make such decisions and accept the fact that their lives were subject to someone else's will and agreements. She couldn't understand why all this was happening to her. Her soul was filled with incomprehension and bitterness because she felt like the only one facing such injustice and cruelty. The delegation from Heburunya carefully studied the contents of the treaty. Everyone knew the princess would soon be married, but no one could even guess who exactly fate and power had destined her to. It turned out that she would marry not the crown prince as expected, but the emperor himself, a man whose power was limitless and whose influence extended to all kingdoms. If it had been the crown prince, many would have taken it calmly and with restraint, but the marriage with the emperor caused a real storm of emotions and bewilderment among the nobility and courtiers. She sent numerous letters to different corners of the palace, trying to get a response and support, but she never received any reaction. Silence and indifference were the only answer. As soon as the situation became known, their attitude towards her suddenly cooled. Even the taxi that was usually ready to take her anywhere now refused to give her a ride, as if it sensed a change in the air. It seemed that the majority sided with Agnes, the king's illegitimate daughter, since it was expected that the princess would soon lose her influence and become an outsider in her own palace. Diana suggested that it would be worthwhile to write to her directly to discuss the situation, but the princess noted that Diana already regularly attended her first golden celebrations, so the connection between them was not interrupted. However, the princess could not understand what exactly was happening and why everything around was turning into a real nightmare filled with suspicion and mistrust. Today, she especially wanted to forget, and a small glass of alcohol would not hurt. The princess felt that she needed to relax at least a little and escape from reality. She started drinking whiskey, but every sip only made her feel worse. A feeling of loneliness and hopelessness grew inside her that she couldn't shake. Diana asked to wait a little, promising that everything would get better soon, and that now all that was needed was a little patience for the situation to become clearer. She diluted the whiskey with water, and the princess tried to do the same. She felt how the bitterness of the drink softened, and along with it, her soul became lighter. The princess asked for more without hesitation, as if she wanted to prolong the fun and forget her daily worries. Her desire seemed natural and insistent, as if it were a way to escape reality. Diana didn't know how to react to such pressure, but she continued pouring, trying to remain calm. She was slightly embarrassed, but refusing would have seemed odd, so she poured again and again. Later, Diana suggested they simply get drunk, forget about all their problems, and release the pent-up tension. It sounded like an attempt to avoid difficulties, though it seemed desperate. She understood that everything that was happening was connected to the woman who had ruined everything, and that it was she who had caused the princess's condition. In her soul, Diana felt the weight of responsibility and inner turmoil. The princess was destined to marry the emperor, a decision beyond her control. Her fate was predetermined, and the weight of this inevitability weighed heavily on her heart. Kirill led the delegation preparing the upcoming events. His role was key. Much depended on his actions and decisions. Despite her official composure, the princess harbored a hidden hatred for Diana. This complicated their relationship and led to internal conflicts between them. Over time, Diana noticed that the princess had become increasingly intoxicated, her behavior becoming less reserved and more sincere. This added drama and unpredictability to the situation. The princess likely believed Diana didn't understand the full depth of what was happening within and around her. This heightened the tension between them. Regina turned out to be right in her assumptions. Her words were confirmed by behavior and emotions which were clearly visible. Everything will change dramatically due to Diana's choice to become a warrior, abandoning her former life. This will impact not only her, but also the fates of those around her, triggering new events. She couldn't believe that for the sake of those whose lives had changed because of her, she would have to take up the sword again and return to the past. This caused intense internal conflict and anxiety. Diana understood that the princess did not like her, and she knew the reasons for this, but this did not bring her relief, but only increased the tension. The princess asked Diana if she knew why exactly she disliked her, but she could not answer since she herself did not fully understand the reason for her dislike. The princess explained that it was all because Diana was too similar to little Agnes, the king's illegitimate sister, which brought back painful memories for her. The lady was shocked by the words and admitted that she found it easier to hear the comparison to a hippopotamus than to realize that she was being seen completely differently. This hurt her. The princess tried to soften what was said, saying that the hippopotamus, although not perfect, evokes sympathy which cannot be said about the situation between them, adding irony. She openly admitted that there was no love between them, as the union was only a political agreement without feelings and mutual attraction, which was obvious to everyone. It was about a king and queen whose marriage was initially a formality and a political move devoid of sincerity, which explained the coldness of their relationship. The princess hoped that there was respect between them that could make the relationship bearable, but this turned out to be an illusion, and respect did not save the situation. Suddenly, the Marquis and a woman who resembled him appeared, and Agnes turned out to be an exact copy of her mother, reinforcing the impression that family traits and destinies were repeating themselves. Then the princess realized that His Majesty knew how to love children, because the Marquis showed warm feelings towards the heirs, in contrast to his coldness towards other people. Unlike him, she couldn't even elicit a smile from him, despite all her efforts, which left her deeply frustrated. Her efforts went unnoticed, making her efforts seem pointless and unappreciated. She thought kindness and patience would help the king love her, but this belief proved hollow. His feelings remained unchanged despite her attempts to improve. The princess realized that she had been mistaken in believing in these hopes, because not every heart opens even with the most sincere and strong efforts. After that, she took another bottle and offered everyone a drink, trying to forget herself with alcohol and get away from the heavy thoughts that were weighing on her soul. She drank quickly without thinking, and Diana tried to stop her, realizing that it was impossible to forget like that, but it was impossible to change her mood and determination. Juliana ignored Diana's attempts and said that the evening was just beginning, that there would be many more revelations and emotions ahead. She wondered why such a beautiful girl was behaving strangely and boldly, as if she was not aware of her beauty and attractiveness, which amazed everyone. Diana didn't expect to hear such words. It confused her because no one had ever said such things to her so openly and directly before. The princess noticed that Diana always attracted attention and was angry when she saw guests secretly looking at her in groups. Diana understood these feelings because she had once been in the princess's place and felt irritated by other people's attention. The princess spent many years trying to earn the love she considered hers, and it exhausted her and made her life bitter. Because of this, she became cold and harsh, even telling Diana that she didn't like her and that she hated her for no reason, hiding her true feelings. However, it was Diana who was the only one who played chess with the princess, brought her novels, and was not afraid to make comments to her. All this irritated the princess, but the fact that someone was there and did not reject her brought at least a small feeling of warmth and support. She was truly grateful for this, because she knew that in her circle of friends there were few who could understand or support her as much as Diana. After a long conversation, the princess finally said it was time to say goodbye, as if she had resigned herself to the fact that their paths were diverging, but the memory of it would remain. They parted after a game of chess with Diana's usual grumbling, and even with those strange books that the princess, although she did not like, still appreciated in these moments. After this, the princess might have asked where Sportmaster was, noticing that the bottle was already empty and there was no more to drink. Her condition had clearly worsened due to the large amount she had consumed. The answer was that the princess had drunk too much and needed to go to bed to recover. They tried to convince her to rest so as not to make the situation worse, but the princess continued to insist, offering to drink more, and even began to hug the people nearby, as if trying to hold on to the moment of joy and forget. In her heart, she didn't understand what to do next. Her life seemed destroyed, as if everything around her was losing its meaning and hope for the best. Perhaps she suggested that they run away from everything together, run away far away to start a new life and forget about their problems. The princess promised that she would treat him well and sincerely asked for forgiveness for all the mistakes and troubles that might have happened. She was truly ready to leave here together, willing to leave the past behind, and try everything again somewhere far away. The princess asked to be taken far away to a place where no one could find her and where she could begin a new chapter in her life. After all this, Diana carefully put her to bed, making sure that the princess could rest peacefully and gain strength. Deep down, Diana felt like she had missed her second chance at a normal, peaceful life, and it brought her regret. The next morning, the princess woke up very early still with some weakness but with hope that everything would change for the better. She saw that Diana was still there next to her in the room, remaining her support and pillar of strength in this difficult moment. The princess did not have time to understand when she completely passed out, so tiredness took over and she lost track of time. It was as if she were telling Diana that her beauty irritated her, as if she herself couldn't understand why her charm provoked such a reaction in those around her. It left a strange feeling of discomfort and doubt in her soul. At one point she cried openly, admitting that she didn't want to go to the empire where everything seemed foreign and frightening. Fear and a reluctance to leave her familiar place weighed heavily on her, giving her no peace. She felt stupid, knowing that she had acted thoughtlessly, and this feeling of her own inadequacy gnawed at her from within like a heavy burden that was difficult to get rid of. She could not understand how she had uttered those awkward words which now seemed so absurd and wrong to her that she wanted to forget them like a bad dream. After this, she had an idea, and so the princess pretended to be asleep, trying to hide her thoughts and feelings from those around her, as if hiding from reality behind closed eyelids. Diana simply looked away, noticing that the princess was not actually sleeping, and this caused her slight surprise and alarm. She understood that her companion was trying to hide something. Diana asked how the princess was feeling, but she tried to ignore her not wanting to show weakness or discuss her feelings with anyone. She felt very ashamed of her behavior yesterday, which seemed inappropriate and stupid to her, and this feeling made her avoid the gaze of others so as not to face condemnation. Diana, looking straight into her eyes, said that she knew that the princess was not sleeping, and this admission made her feel even more vulnerable and open. The princess stretched, trying to get rid of the tension, but immediately felt a sharp headache that robbed her of strength and concentration, as if everything around her had gone dark. Diana asked me to wait a little, promising to bring warm water with honey to help ease the condition and soothe the painful sensations in my head. But the princess suddenly grabbed Diana by the dress, and Diana thought that she wanted to run away, or somehow move away, which caused her mixed feelings of incomprehension and anxiety. Diana could not understand what was happening to the princess. Perhaps she had not yet recovered from what she had experienced, and was still in confusion, which prevented her from behaving normally. The princess couldn't understand what exactly Diana was talking about when she spoke, so she asked what had happened the night before, trying to get a handle on the situation. Diana briefly replied that she was about to set out, intending to leave this place and move on without further explanation. The princess still didn't understand what kind of trip was planned, and then Diana clarified that if she was afraid to go alone, then she was ready to accompany her to the empire to support her. Ultimately, the princess was left in complete shock when she later heard the details and realized the true meaning of Diana's words, which seemed strange to her. Diana admitted that this was her response to the sincere confession that the princess made the day before, and she wanted to show her attitude with this. In life, people usually quickly get used to new circumstances, are able to adapt, and find ways to live in changed conditions without major shocks. In the morning, the princess asked her maid to bring her water with honey and medicine to help her cope with the consequences of the previous evening and feel better. The maid thought that the princess had already drunk everything and said that she would soon bring something else, carefully trying to ease her condition. This was even for the best, because the princess decided that now it was time to teach the Viscount a lesson, put him in his place, and then he would leave the country to avoid further problems. She had been putting this moment off for a long time, but now it was time to leave here and start a new chapter, despite all the doubts and fears. However, before leaving, she noticed Kirill, who was nearby, and this immediately raised questions and concerns in her. She wondered what he was doing there because his behavior seemed suspicious and illogical in this situation. Soon he noticed her himself standing in the rain as if waiting for something important, and their eyes met at that moment. He noticed that his path had crossed with the lady again on the street. It was unexpected, but despite the bustle, they managed to exchange glances and a brief nod as if reminding each other of their connection. He had to do something, and the lady confirmed it. The words were unclear, but the meaning was clear. It was an important matter requiring his attention and determination. He noticed that it rained frequently here while his home region had been experiencing prolonged drought. The contrast in weather seemed strange, as if nature were playing a game on him. The weather in the capital seemed fine, but beyond its borders, a severe water shortage was felt everywhere. This was worrying because without water, life loses its meaning and nature loses its power. He was surprised that, despite the drought, the fruit only grew sweeter, as if the earth itself was trying to bring him joy in difficult times. It seemed a mystery, but a pleasant surprise. Afterwards, he asked if the lady would like to try the fruit sometime. His question was cautious with a hint of hope, as if inviting her to share this small gift of nature. The lady was embarrassed, not expecting such attention, and at that moment the maid approached her, interrupting them for a moment with her appearance. The maid addressed those present with the message that she had brought medicine, and after that Diana said goodbye to them and left, leaving a quiet feeling of incompleteness in the air. Inside her, her heart began to throb again, not obeying her and beating in an unpredictable rhythm, reminding her of the feelings she had tried to hide and not notice. He hurried to the young gentleman and was surprised to find that he had stood motionless the whole time, as if he were expecting something important that he himself did not yet know about. Walter searched for him everywhere for a long time, unsure what could have happened. He was worried and trying to figure out why he had disappeared, but so far there was no trace of him. His entire focus was on the search. The gentleman reported that the fruit treatment didn't produce the desired results, and nothing else worked. Plans related to this had to be put on hold as nothing produced the expected effect. Diana had an important matter to attend to before leaving for the Empire. It was something necessary and urgent, requiring her attention and preparation in advance. Meanwhile, Baru had almost reached his limit. His strength and patience were dwindling, and it seemed he was on the brink of no longer being able to endure the current trials. It seemed like a turning point. A transition to a new level was just around the corner, but Diana couldn't cross the invisible barrier holding her back. This obstacle remained insurmountable. He saw no end to what was happening, and he didn't understand how much longer he would have to wander and struggle before the situation changed. The feeling of infinity weighed on him. He needed to stay close to Lady Diana as quickly as possible to protect her. His job was to stand guard and ensure her safety in any situation. Diana herself suddenly approached from behind. Her appearance made him start and focus, shifting his attention from his worries to her. He was startled, turned sharply, and saw Lady Diana standing before him. Her sudden appearance caught him off guard, but he immediately recognized who it was. He asked what was wrong with her clothes, and Diana explained that this was exactly the outfit she needed for where she was going. It was important and justified. He was surprised and asked where exactly she was heading, not even realizing she had come so close. His attention was too distracted to immediately notice her approach. Even though she concealed her aura, he was surprised he could have missed her so close and not noticed. Apparently, he was too focused on his own thoughts and feelings to notice what was happening around him. He agreed without objection, and the lady asked him to follow her, leading her carefully and confidently, as if she were leading him to something very important and personal, requiring complete trust and attention. He couldn't understand how it was possible that she could climb the mountain so easily and smoothly, demonstrating an amazing lightness, as if the wind was carrying her, and not the usual fatigue was crippling her body. He was amazed by her endurance, which was incredible and almost equal to the strength of experienced knights he had once met. Such resilience seemed almost superhuman. He knew that he had not come here by chance. This was her secret place where she sometimes retreated to be alone with herself, to hide from the world and from all the worries that surrounded her. He had no idea that there was such a secluded place nearby, hidden from prying eyes, full of silence and tranquility, like a separate world in the midst of endless hustle and bustle. Everything was perfect here, and she admitted that she wanted to tell him something important. But her words were delayed, as if they were afraid to disturb this atmosphere of peace. She invited him to initiate the conversation, as if inviting him into a confidential exchange of thoughts, which meant that something unusual was about to happen. He couldn't understand what exactly she was talking about. Her words seemed mysterious, as if they were hiding a deep meaning that he couldn't yet decipher. She said she had just stabbed him in the stomach, words that came out of the blue and made his heart beat faster, like a confession of something very serious. She added that she had intended to wait until he could overcome his limitations, so that they could overcome the difficulties together. But now everything had changed. Circumstances had developed in such a way that now the moment had come when he could no longer hold back. He had to overcome that inner wall that had been preventing him from moving forward for a long time. It was that very wall that he could not overcome on his own, but now the time had come to destroy it in order to free himself and become stronger to take the step that had long been postponed. Her movements were filled with grace and elegance. Every gesture seemed precise and beautiful, like a dance that fascinated and attracted the eye. At the same time, she asked him to draw his sword, warning that if he did not do so, he could suffer, hinting at the seriousness of the situation and the inevitability of conflict. He really became scared. Fear took hold of him because now everything depended on how ready he was to accept the challenge and defend himself in this unexpected clash. He clenched his teeth, trying not to show his emotions, but internally he felt the tension that was growing with every second in this difficult situation. He asked if this lady was really the one rumored, trying to hide the doubt in his voice. The lady noticed that he himself understood very well who she was, and there was no need to ask again. She turned out to be Lady Diana Resley, known for her determination and unyielding character. He asked again, unsure if it was really Lady Diana in front of him looking for confirmation. She explained that she understood his confusion, but that now he had to be extremely focused and attentive. She asked if he really intended not to draw his sword in such a situation, demonstrating the seriousness of his words. When she launched her attack, she forced him to reach for his weapon, but he held back and did not draw his sword fully. Her movements were swift and dexterous, demonstrating a high level of skill and speed. She noted that he was still relaxed, which revealed his inner state and lack of readiness for battle. She insisted that he draw his sword to be prepared for any possible developments. He could not understand how to point a naked sword at the lady he served and to whom he owed respect. She quickly explained that it was her actions that would cause him to draw his weapon, putting him in a difficult position. Having decided to use her power and influence, she moved to active actions demonstrating the seriousness of her intentions. Despite the pressure, he remained firm and did not rush to reveal his weapon, maintaining internal control. He could not understand where people who had never held a sword got such strength and confidence in battle. He eventually fell to the floor, feeling weak and having difficulty breathing after the intense confrontation. She used her magic, and its effect was so precise that it cut his skin. The prick was unexpected, but not too deep, though he had never expected such a turn of events. The wound was minor, but it took him by surprise, as he hadn't expected her to take such a step. He had to rethink the entire situation, as her magic had proven effective and unexpected. He recognized her intentions, sensed the message she was trying to convey through this action, and internally understood what had happened. His thoughts cleared, and he agreed with her position, though the words remained unspoken. It became clear that he understood exactly what she wanted to achieve, and he didn't resist this realization. His internal attitude toward her and what was happening changed, and he began to perceive the situation differently. In the end, he decided to draw his sword, thereby showing the seriousness of his intentions, and made it clear that he was ready for a real confrontation with no intention of retreating. She remarked that this should have been done much earlier, and there was a quiet remark from her side that now everything would be different and the game would begin in earnest. This time she had no intention of giving in or giving in. She was determined, ready to fight without compromise. Asking him to concentrate, she began to act, feeling slightly dizzy, but not losing control of the situation. She attacked his legs with lightning speed, and he didn't even have time to react to this unexpected blow, which gave her an advantage in the fight. After such a maneuver, every step became dangerous, and if he stumbled, it would mean death, because the balance on the battlefield had become critical. His chances of recovery and regaining his strength seemed dim and uncertain. No one knew if he would be able to come to his senses in time. His gaze was cold and firm, like the gaze of a commander who does not allow himself to show weakness and expresses strength and determination. She ordered him to stand up, which was just the beginning, and he even mistakenly called her commander, which showed his inner respect and perception of her strength. It was incredibly difficult for him to restrain himself, while the lady sat calmly and confidently, as if this whole conflict did not affect her at all. She admitted that she had not experienced such tension and anxiety for a long time, so much so that she even turned pale from worry. He noted that if her abilities in swordsmanship were so outstanding, it was unclear why she had never picked up a weapon, because she could have become a magnificent knight. The lady replied that she hated swords with all her heart, and this was the reason for her refusal to touch them even in her thoughts. She will definitely not take up the sword a second time because this idea is unacceptable and disgusting to her. She expressed her wish that he would become stronger and tougher to protect himself and her, since she herself would no longer fight with a sword. So her goal is to make sure she gives up weapons forever, and that he is the one who will be strong and decisive in this role. He introduced himself as Baru, confirming that he would follow her orders and do everything to ensure that she would never have to pick up a sword again. She appreciated this attitude, noting that this was the approach she really liked, although there was some reservation. He assured her that he would accompany her on her way back, showing concern and a desire to help her get there safely. He couldn't understand the reason for the unusual three-colored aura that emanated from her, because usually it was one color. Usually her aura manifested itself clearly in one shade, so this variety seemed strange and unusual to him. The maids were absolutely delighted with her appearance, happily discussing the lady's return and showing lively interest. They said that they had been waiting for her, expressing impatience and willingness to help in whatever was needed. The maids invited her up to the room, promising to prepare a warm bath for her so that she could rest. However, she was surprised by their unusual behavior, since before the maids rarely showed such interest in her. She asked about Olga's whereabouts, to which the maids replied that she was busy with an urgent assignment and that they would completely replace her. He smelled a strange scent that seemed unusual and incomprehensible while she was taking a bath with rose petals. She was puzzled by what was happening and did not understand at all what exactly was happening around her at that moment. A special scent with notes of androsis has been added to the bath, promising relaxation and comfort after a long day. She thought the maids were crazy because andros was a very expensive and rare ingredient for such procedures. This andros was imported in small quantities due to low production volumes, which made it especially valuable and rare. It was that same andros with a small bottle, the price of which was higher than any designer dress. She couldn't understand what exactly had happened and why everything had turned out so strange at that moment. The maid confidently said that she did not understand her words and that they were simply doing their usual work. Nothing more, nothing less. They decided to see things through and continue to improve the point that was important to them. She remembered that her mother loved this scent very much during her life. It was special and dear to her. Everyone around was simply delighted with the smell and smiled as if remembering something good. They said they knew in advance that she would definitely like it, and that it would evoke pleasant feelings. And indeed, she really liked this scent, awakening warm memories and emotions. If you think about it, Mom didn't show much interest in her daughter Diana and was quite cold. Despite her nobility and outward dignity, the mother always kept some distance from her daughter. Diana always lacked maternal love, and she acutely felt its absence in her life. Only in rare moments, when her mother extended her warm hand to her, did it seem that the world was becoming kinder. At such moments it seemed that this whole big and cold world belonged only to her. The scent of andros emanating from my mother created a special atmosphere, filling everything around with tenderness. But Diana didn't know what to do next, and accidentally dropped the bottle on the floor, breaking it. She said she hated the scent, that it brought her pain and bad memories. The sister most likely used this scent carefully and with great care. Then Diana asked to bring the golden fragrance, which her sister did not like at all. and they managed to bring it quickly before Diana's skin swelled from the hot water she was in. Diana was completely confused and did not understand what was going on around her and why everything was so complicated. After everything that happened, she quickly got dressed, collected her things, and left without looking back. She sat down at the table as if expecting something important. Her father had told her to say hello because Viscount Badley was standing before them. Father heard that she and the Viscount had already met and said that he seemed to know everything about her and their past. He understood that Diana had strong feelings for the Viscount in her soul, and he believed that he could be the best husband for her. The father also addressed the lady, noticing that she was very shy, but was trying to act confidently as if she had changed a little today. Regina admitted that she envies Diana for having such a chance and such a relationship. She noted that Diana and the Viscount looked very harmonious together and complemented each other perfectly. Perhaps Diana should cut herself off from all ties with the Badley family, since today is the very people who are hindering her. Deep down, she wanted to show them all her strength as if she was going to knock out their teeth. Such an attractive and noble man, having certainly become her husband, could bring her constant joy and happiness. Now Regina could rest easy, because she was confident that her sister would be in safe and caring hands. Diana asked if Regina really only wanted the best and supported her in this situation. In response, Regina asked in surprise why Diana was suddenly speaking to her in such a special way, as if opening a new page. She said that the Viscount was a worthy man and Diana was very lucky because other contenders could have passed her over before. Diana expressed hope that over time her opinion about what was happening would change and she would be able to accept everything with an open heart. Regina didn't immediately understand what exactly they were talking about, but Diana explained that everything was exactly as she said, simply honest and straightforward. At that moment, the butler suddenly ran in and began to intervene in the conversation, as if trying to urgently communicate something or interrupt the conversation. He turned to the owner, who did not understand why an uninvited guest had burst in. The owner was sure that they weren't expecting any visitors without warning since they had an important guest. But the butler explained that a royal decree had been received and he was obliged to deliver it personally to the Viscount. The Viscount found himself in the hands of a paper containing a royal order that required immediate attention. In fulfilling his duty, the Viscount began to read the text of the decree, read by the Royal Majesty. The decree stated that the Viscount's second daughter, Diana Resley, had been chosen as Princess Juliana's bridesmaid. She was to accompany the princess to the Empire, playing an important and honorable role in the celebration. Diana, upon learning of this, immediately stood up and happily agreed to carry out the royal commission. She understood that completing this mission would entail a delay in her personal life and marriage. Once the bridesmaid service is over, she may miss out on a good opportunity to get married. The Viscount promised to compensate her for this lost period in a special way and to support her. The relatives listened to the Viscount's words in silence, showing neither support nor objections. Diana still didn't know what to do in the current situation with the order. She stressed that she could not disobey the royal order and counted on the family's understanding. It was expected that her relatives would make a decision without unnecessary arguments and support her choice. She also stated that she would not ask the young man to wait for her return from the mission. A young man, the son of a prominent Viscount family, must start his own family as soon as possible. However, the family found a solution that helped them cope with this dilemma. The father listened attentively, and the Viscount was pleased with the way he had found to get out of the situation. Diana explained that the decision was related to her sister Regina and her future marriage. Regina didn't immediately understand what was being discussed and asked for an explanation, a little irritated. Diana reminded that Regina had already spoken at the table about her envy and the possibility of a good husband. However, Regina was surprised and asked when she said this, doubting her words. Then she noticed the Viscount's smile, which made her think about what had been said earlier. The Viscount confirmed that he had indeed heard good words about himself from Regina's lips. He doesn't fall in love at first sight, but he's not at all indifferent to women's love. He has feelings. Diana noted that everything had worked out perfectly, and now her sister wouldn't have to be jealous. They looked great together. Regina is slightly inferior in appearance to Lady Diana, but he will have to put up with this and date both of them. Diana admitted that she was still glad that today's conversation about marriage had at least yielded some results. Recond noted that it would also be advantageous for Lady Regina to marry him, as it would strengthen her position. Diana admitted that she had doubts for a long time and was worried about what would happen to her sister if she got married first. He was informed that unfortunately he would not be able to wait long and he needed results sooner. He really needs connections with this family, so he agrees despite the conditions. Diana noted that Regina really loves the scent of Andros. It is her favorite scent. He replied that for her sake he was ready to forget about all the scents, and that next to him she would not need any Andros. She will forget all the old smells and will not need others because he will be nearby. Diana noted that he was a true romantic, and he asked Regina not to be embarrassed by his feelings. Life can be unpredictable, and now Regina realized this, especially when it comes to capricious cats.